Chapter 215. The diplomatic mission's itinerary in Shangjing, northern Qi, had been set long ago. Logically speaking, someone of Fan Xian's status in Shangjing would be accompanied by a corresponding attendant, but Fan Xian was wary of this arrangement. Although there were already officials stationed there to negotiate, he still went to the Ministry of Rites with the permission of the northern Qi royal family. In the secret agreement, Yan Bingyun was exchanged for Xiao En and Sea Lily. The kingdom of Qing had already suffered a great loss, so Fan Xian was anxious to find the other side's hidden executor. But unexpectedly, the nominal Minister Shi of the Ministry of Rites, the real vice provost of the Northern Qi Brocade Guard, was hiding from him. It seemed that they wanted to delay for a few more days. Fan Xian was furious. He waved his sleeves and walked out of the Ministry of Rites, ignoring the Qi officials. At the entrance of the Ministry of Rites, Ling Jing had already hurried over from the Chamberlain of Dependencies. He quietly shook his head at Fan Xian. The four of them got back into the carriage. Ling Jing said, "Vice Minister Wei Hua disappeared after leaving the palace. We don't know where he went." Fan Xian sighed. "It's probably the same elsewhere. The Qi people want to delay for a few more days." "What's the point of delaying for a few more days?" Wang Qinian frowned. "They're going to hand him over anyway. I don't believe they can keep delaying." Fan Xian shook his head. "We need to get Yan Bingyun out as soon as possible."
"How?"
"Go to Wei Hua's house." Chang Ningho's house. Ling Jing said awkwardly. "That's the Empress Dowager's brother. For us foreign ambassadors to rush over is a huge taboo. It's against the system, and I'm afraid it will cause a lot of trouble." Fan Xian laughed. "It would be best if the Northern Qi Emperor's imperial censors could go to court tomorrow to accuse Chang Ningho of colluding with a foreign country. That would be even better." After the plan was decided, the carriage left the Ministry of Rites. The imperial guards followed, and in the distance, there were spies who looked like passers-by. Wang Qinian sat in the carriage, but he could smell them from afar. He whispered to Fan Xian, "Commissioner, it should be the Brocade Guard following us. In any case, the Imperial Guards are with us. Are they afraid we'll get lost?" Fan Xian whispered. "Ignore them. Most importantly, don't be in a rush to contact the Council's people in Northern Qi. It's not good to bring unnecessary danger to those spies." The secret agents of Northern Qi, who had been ordered by the court to keep an eye on the diplomatic mission, were also curious. After leaving the Board of Rites, these envoys from the south were interested in going shopping, especially on Shangjing's most luxurious and extravagant street, Xiushui Street. The streets sold luxurious items such as glassware, which was not something the common people could afford. A secret agent frowned and asked, "Why are these southern barbarians strolling around Xiushui Street?" The subordinate beside him replied, "It's rare for us to go abroad, so of course we have to buy some good stuff back. These southern barbarians are filthy rich now. If we don't buy some glasses, how are we going to explain to our families?" "Idiot!" The spy in front cursed. "All the glass in the world is produced by the Qing kingdom. Why would they need to come to Shangjing to buy it?" There weren't many people on Xiushui Street, but the people walking there were all pot-bellied people. Women with beaded hairpins all over their heads looked like they didn't have much silver in their pockets, but the banknotes were definitely much thicker than the books at home. The shops lined the street, and there was some distance between them, not too far away, not too close, just right. The signboards were even more eye-catching, placed vertically outside the shops. They were painted black with gold characters, but some of the gold characters had gradually faded. The rich owners didn't seem to want to change them. Upon closer inspection, one would realize that the signboards were very old, and the inscriptions were often made by famous people from 100 years ago, or even hundreds of years ago. The reason why the gold characters had gradually faded was that these merchants wanted to deliberately create an old-fashioned, honest atmosphere and flaunt the aura of a century-old shop. Only the 7 shops in the center of Xiushui Street were different. The signboards were all horizontal, and although they weren't brand new, compared to their surroundings, they seemed much younger. Some of these shops sold glassware, some sold soaps, some sold perfume, some sold cotton cloth, and some sold alcohol. The strangest thing was that there was one shop that specialized in selling toys. A few carriages stopped at the end of the street. They were escorted by soldiers of the Imperial Army, and their stance was even more impressive than that of a first-rank noble. But all the merchants on Xiaoshui Street maintained their arrogance. No one came out to welcome the guests. They just waited for the 4 people who got off the carriages to walk past one by one. The 4 of them walked all the way into Silk Street and finally stopped in front of the door of the shop that sold cotton cloth. The young man with the most delicate features scratched his head as if he didn't understand why cotton cloth was considered a luxury item. After entering the shop, the owner explained to the few unfamiliar guests, "Speaking of growing cotton, legend has it that there was a genius with the surname Wang who did it hundreds of years ago. However, the method was gradually lost and no one used it anymore. It wasn't until 20 years ago, when our old boss was gifted by the heavens, that he was able to pick up this method again. Everyone please take a look. This cotton cloth is warmer than silk, and it's cheap. It's of good quality, and it's not much worse than the South Qing's capital." The handsome young man seemed to be very interested and said, "Let me try one foot." The owner's face darkened. He recognized the young man's Qing accent and cursed, "So, it's a fellow countryman. I say, sir, how can we Qing people come to northern Qi to buy cotton cloth? Furthermore, other people buy them in bundles. You, on the other hand, try one foot." The young man chuckled and cupped his hands in apology. He left the shop and raised his head to look at the words on the horizontal signboard. He furrowed his brows and said, "This handwriting is really ugly." The owner was furious and scolded. "This was personally written by our old owner. You don't know what's good for you. Get out of here." The young man chuckled and led his 3 subordinates to another shop on the side. This young man was, of course, Fan Xian. The ugly words he spoke of were written by his mother many years ago. The handwriting was not much different from the handwriting on the letter in the box. It was exactly as ugly as the handwriting on the letter. After walking for a while, Fan Xian realized that these shops were all businesses of Qing royal merchants in northern Qi. Of course, many years ago they were all businesses of the Yi family. Just by looking at the things they sold, he knew that his mother must have made a lot of money from the hands of the world's nobles. Walking on Xiaoshui Street, among the signboards his mother had written, Fan Xian was a little dazed. It seemed that he didn't want to go any further. "Sir, what are we doing here instead of going to Changningho's manor?" Lin Jing asked worriedly. Fan Xian was a little surprised. He came to his senses and smiled. "Of course we're here to buy a gift. There's no reason to come empty-handed." As he said this, he had already lifted the corner of his robe and stepped into the largest glass shop. There were all sorts of glass products on display in the shop, all of them extraordinarily beautiful. There were flat wine cups, double-eared cups, and transparent jade pots. They were mainly wine utensils, but there were also all sorts of small utensils, including glass insect boxes, all sorts of chess sets, and even a crystal-clear oil lamp. The whole shop was as dazzling as crystal. Fan Xian felt a faint sense of pride. Although he seemed to have spent most of his time in this world and hadn't done anything earth-shattering, looking at the things his mother had left behind, he couldn't help but think, if someone had already done it, what was there left for him to do? The shopkeeper had already heard their conversation and knew that they were fellow Southerners. He smiled. "Gentlemen, it's not that I don't want to do business with you, but if you were to buy glass in Shangjing, it would be a bit of a loss." Fan Xian smiled. "I know. Shangjing must be a lot more expensive than here in the Kingdom of Qing. But I see that Northern Qi's palace uses a lot of glass. Don't they think it's expensive?" The shopkeeper beamed. "Who's the stupidest customer in the world? Of course it's the emperor. I heard that the deal with the Northern Qi palace was the biggest deal our old master ever made. That amount scared the rest of the world's rich merchants silly." Fan Xian smiled proudly. "You're quite bold to say that. You're in Northern Qi. Aren't you afraid that the officials will catch you?" "I'm not afraid. As long as the Kingdom of Qing remains the most powerful country in the world, we merchants will not be bullied wherever we go." Even so, the shop owner still lowered his voice and continued, "The phrase, 'the dumbest customer in the world,' isn't something I can say. I heard from my master, and it was also said by my old boss back then." Fan Xian smiled and suddenly asked, "Is your master a big leaf or a few leaves?" The shopkeeper was startled. He raised his head to look at Fan Xian, as if he couldn't believe that this handsome young man knew so much. For a moment, he forgot to answer. Lin Jing smiled. This is Master Fan Xian, the head envoy of this diplomatic mission. Although you're far away in the north, I'm sure you know who Master Fan is. Master Fan? That was the shopkeeper of all the royal merchants in the coming years. The shopkeeper paled. He quickly lifted his robe and knelt before Fan Xian. Chapter 216. Fan Xian hurried to help him up, but the shopkeeper insisted on kneeling and kowtowing. He then rose and said, "So you are my future boss. I have to kowtow no matter what. Furthermore, you are the head envoy of this diplomatic mission. I am in a foreign country, and even if I wanted to pay my respects to the people back home, I would have nowhere to go." The shopkeeper suddenly came to his senses. He remembered that he had mentioned some taboo names in front of this man from the south. He couldn't help but ask, "Master Fan, what brings you to my humble shop?" Northern Qi was, after all, far away from the Qing emperor, so the merchants here were a bit more daring. That was why they still kept their old signboards and kept mentioning the old boss they were so proud of. Fan Xian looked at the shopkeeper's expression and knew that he was afraid these words would get back to the capital and offend the royal family, who now controlled all the businesses outside of Qing. He smiled and told the shopkeeper why he had come. He wanted the shopkeeper to pick out a few exquisite glass wine utensils. "What are they used for?" asked the shopkeeper curiously. He had originally thought that Master Fan was taking advantage of this diplomatic mission to check out the business he would be managing in the future. He didn't know that Fan Xian was actually planning to buy glass products. Ling Jing explained a bit, and the shopkeeper hurriedly called out his assistants. A few agile assistants listened and hurried into the storeroom. It seemed that the truly high-end goods were not stored in the front of the shop. While they waited, Fan Xian and the shopkeeper began to chat. The shopkeeper knew what Fan Xian wanted to know and didn't dare to hide anything. He gave him a rough estimate of the number of glass products that Qing had exported to Northern Qi over the years. Although it was only a rough estimate, Fan Xian was still somewhat surprised. There was only one glass shop in Shangjing, and its annual revenue was terrifying. It was no wonder that despite the wealth of the Kingdom of Qi, they were only on par with the Kingdom of Qing in terms of wealth. The shopkeeper suddenly sighed. But for some reason, the goods sent from the capital have not been as good as before, and there is nothing new, so business has been a bit worse. "How bad is it compared to when it was at its peak?" asked Fan Xian. "About 30% off." Fan Xian pondered for a moment. He knew where the problem was. After the Yi family had been taken into the palace treasury, the eldest princess had full control. Even if that crazy woman was someone with great political wisdom and skill, when faced with something completely new like glass soap, she would probably still be clueless. Since the quality of the glass was poor, there must have been a problem with the ingredients and process. Since the shopkeepers of Qingyu Hall could not do it themselves, there was no way they could make adjustments. But business was only 30% off. It seemed that the eldest princess knew the importance of these businesses to the kingdom of Qing's economy and did not cause trouble. But business was only 30% off. While they were talking, the young workers had already brought out the most precious glass bottles in the shop. Fan Xian picked one up and squinted at it against the sunlight outside the shop. He found that there was not a trace of impurity in the glass. It was indeed much better than the glass windows in the capital. He couldn't help but smile and say, "These are the ones." The shopkeeper hurriedly called for the shopkeeper to wrap it up. Unexpectedly, Fan Xian waved his hand. "Don't worry." The shopkeeper did not understand what he meant and could only listen. Suddenly, the shopkeeper looked troubled. Fan Xian had already noticed it. "What is your surname?" he asked. "My surname is Yu," replied the shopkeeper quickly. "An apprentice of Qingyu Hall with the surname Yu?" Fan Xian smiled to himself. "Is there something troubling you, shopkeeper Yu?" The shopkeeper smiled wryly. "Master Fan, these glass bottles were prepared for the Empress Dowager's birthday at the end of the month." Fan Xian was slightly surprised. "Could it be that the nobles of Northern Qi ordered these gifts for your birthday? Then I can't accept them. Shopkeeper Yu, please give me a few more." Shopkeeper Yu was surprised. He did not expect such a high-ranking official to be so easy to talk to. He quickly explained, "We didn't order them because the nobles of Northern Qi always knew that our shop always had a few good items. Speaking of which, these glass bottles are not the most expensive gifts, but the rules of the palace treasury are strict. This month is usually a rich month, and if you take these when you report to the south at the end of the month, you will be short a lot of money. I'm afraid that the people of the palace treasury will." Before he finished speaking, Fan Xian understood what the shopkeeper was afraid of. He smiled. "Don't worry, of course they will pay you." Wang Qinian also laughed. "Afraid that the palace treasury will check your accounts? Don't you know that the person in front of you is the future master of the palace treasury?" Shopkeeper Yu stammered as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. In his heart, he thought, even if this master Fan is the future master of the palace treasury, the problem is that the person in charge of the thousands of businesses in the world right now is not a master. Suddenly, Fan Xian patted his pouch and smiled bitterly. "It seems that I forgot to bring something on this trip to Northern Qi." Everyone silently understood. As the head of the diplomatic mission, Fan Xian's trip to Northern Qi was naturally a public one. Although he had some spare silver on him, there was no way he would have prepared so many banknotes. Shopkeeper Yu continued to wipe his sweat. "Master, if this is official business, then naturally it should be reported to the public accounts. Master, please write a list, and I will send it back to the capital. That should be enough to pay off the bill." A promissory note? That's a good idea. Fan Xian thought to himself. He accepted the brush, ink, and paper that he had prepared earlier. He thought that this shopkeeper Yu was very observant. He had probably seen too many cases of envoys writing promissory notes. He scribbled a few lines on the paper, and shopkeeper Yu carefully wrote down the amount of money. When it was Fan Xian's turn to sign, he hesitated. He turned around and asked Wang Qinian, "Does the council have money?" Wang Qinian smiled bitterly. 1/3 of the council's finances are provided by His Majesty, and 2/3 by the Ministry of Revenue, which is your father. In recent years, things have been a little tight. Fan Xian turned to look at Gouda. "You follow your father, so of course the Tiger Guards are rich." Gouda saw the young master looking at him, and his face was filled with embarrassment. "Young master, the old master is very strict with the Tiger Guard's finances." Fan Xian sighed and looked at Lin Jing. "It seems that I will have to use the name of the office of the Grand Herald." Lin Jing held back a bitter smile. He thought, "You are clearly eating the office of the Grand Herald. What else can I say?" Anyway, it was all public accounts, so Lin Jing did not feel bad. He even joked, "The palace treasury and the external treasury are always inferior to the national treasury." This was very true. Whether it was the palace treasury, which was currently managed by the eldest princess, or the Ministry of Revenue, which was managed by Count Sinan, in the end, it was still the money of the Kingdom of Qing. Fan Xian and Lin Jing, the envoy and deputy, confidently signed their names. They glanced at the 2,000 taels of silver on the paper and then walked out of the glass shop. They did not have any attendants following them, so shopkeeper Yu carefully instructed the workers to carry the precious glass bottles and follow them out. Because Fan Xian did not instruct them to return them to the diplomatic mission, they presumably had other uses for them. As they walked past the toy shop that sold 9 rings and Xiaorong Road, Fan Xian only glanced at it, his gaze gentle. The shop in front of them sold wine, and Fan Xian walked in first. The shopkeeper had already been informed by his servants that a few high-ranking officials from his hometown had arrived, and was standing at the door to welcome them respectfully. Fan Xian sat on a chair and glanced around. He found that the wine utensils were also very expensive, but they were far inferior to the glass bottles he had bought. He waved his hand and asked the owner to step forward. "What is the best wine?" The shopkeeper's surname was Sheng, and he produced a thin, transparent bottle as if by magic. The wine in the bottle was suffused with an extremely alluring red color, rich but not thick. Fan Xian narrowed his eyes. "Grape wine?" he asked in surprise. "Master Fan, you truly are an immortal of wine and poetry." Shopkeeper Sheng had long since inquired about the composition of the diplomatic mission from his hometown. He smiled flatteringly. It is indeed grape wine. He took out a cup and poured some into it. Fan Xian closed his eyes, swirled the open cup slightly, and brought it to his nose for a sniff. Seeing this, not only did Wang Qinian, who had once lived a luxurious life, but even Lin Jing and shopkeeper Sheng were filled with admiration. Master Fan was indeed the descendant of a famous family. Fan Xian was no master of wine. He was just putting on a show. He placed the cup on the table next to him. "I'll take this wine," he said. "Pick out some stronger ones." Shopkeeper Sheng did not dare to tarry, and hurriedly offered them up one by one. Fan Xian took a sip and frowned slightly. This was not much different from the wine he normally drank. It was far inferior to the sorghum wine Uncle Wu Zhu had made for him in Danzhou and the tribute wine from the capital. Seeing Fan Xian frown, shopkeeper Sheng said in a low voice, "Strong wine is forbidden in the north."
"Please understand, master."
Fan Xian knew that shopkeeper Sheng was not speaking the truth. There was nothing in this world that money could not buy. Many of the nobles of northern Qi were rich and powerful, and their hands were never soft when it came to spending money. Shopkeeper Sheng must have prepared some high-class goods. Fan Xian did not say much, and only shook his head to show his dissatisfaction. Shopkeeper Sheng suddenly looked at him, and then took out 2 more bottles of wine. Fan Xian furrowed his brows slightly. In that glance earlier, this seemingly ordinary boss had revealed an extraordinary expression. Fan Xian took a sip in a small porcelain cup, and then frowned. He did not say anything for a long time. Everyone thought that the wine did not taste good. Wang Qinian could not help but ask, "Master, what is it?" Fan Xian took a deep breath, turning the burning sensation in his throat into a thrill of excitement. "Good wine," he exclaimed in admiration.
"Good wine."
"What is it called?" Shopkeeper Sheng smiled. 5-grain liquor. Fan Xian's expression did not change, and he praised again. "Good name." But in his heart, he smiled bitterly. "Yi Qingmei, back in the day you were so free." Having done all this, the 4 officials rose and left. But as he was leaving, Fan Xian noticed that the shopkeeper, whose surname was Sheng, was giving him a meaningful look. Thinking back to what he had noticed earlier, Fan Xian stopped and let the other 3 go first. He turned around and followed the shopkeeper to the accounting room in the back. There was no one in the accounting room, and it was strangely quiet. As soon as shopkeeper Sheng entered the room, he seemed to have changed into a different person. His entire body straightened, and his expression was solemn. He bowed to Fan Xian, who was sitting on the chair, and said in a low voice, "Sheng Huairan of the palace treasury greets you, master." Chapter 217. Fan Xian's expression did not change. He had expected this. Today's trip to Xiushui Street was, on the surface, secondary. The key was to see how the palace treasury was doing in the north. So when he heard Sheng Huairan call him son-in-law, he was not surprised. After all, the palace treasury was still managed by the eldest princess, and there would always be some of her trusted aides hidden in northern Qi. For some reason, Fan Xian believed that the eldest princess would send someone to find him, the head envoy of the diplomatic mission. This was not only intuition but also a judgment of the people of Qing. Whether the people of Qing were virtuous or foolish, they all had a self-confidence and pride that bordered on paranoia. There must be a reason why the eldest princess wanted to let Shaoan go. If it did not have to do with the secrets of the temple, then it had to do with Shang Shanhu, who lived in Shangjing. Now that Shaoan had been sent to northern Qi, the eldest princess would naturally contact her son-in-law, the head envoy of the diplomatic mission, if she wanted to rescue him. But the word son-in-law still struck Fan Xian as absurd. It seemed that his mother-in-law would not like him more and more as she looked at him. Since Sheng Huairan dared to call him son-in-law, then he must be the most trusted aide of the eldest princess. Fan Xian looked at him and nodded. "Elder, what do you have to say?" Sheng Huairan did not say anything. He only handed him a letter. Sitting in the carriage, Fan Xian squeezed the letter in his sleeve. He had not yet had time to read it, but he was already beginning to feel the weight of the letter. After today's business was finished, he would have to deal with it. Wang Qinian was an expert at tracking, and Gauda was an amazing fighter, but he would be missing someone to help him judge the situation and analyze intelligence. He couldn't help but think of the students he had taken in during the spring examination. Those guys should have been sent away by now. Perhaps they could become officials, but conspiracies were not their forte. Even if he wanted to train Shi Chanli, it would be too late. Fan Xian suddenly had an idea. If he could get Yan Bingyan out quickly, he believed that it would be of great help to the government's plans. At that moment, Wang Qinian respectfully handed over a thin piece of paper. Fan Xian raised his eyes and glanced at it. It was a banknote worth 500 taels of silver. He frowned. What is this? It's a commission from Boss Yu of the glass shop. Fan Xian glanced at it again and said with a smile, you can also get a commission if you make a promissory note. You and Gao to take it and split it. Oh, right, leave some for the tiger guards. 500 taels of silver was already a large sum, but Fan Xian had given it away without even looking up. Only a wealthy family like the Fan family could cultivate such a habit. Now that Fan Xijia was a millionaire with an annual income of 10,000 taels of silver, he did not care about such a small sum. Ling Jing smiled and said, Sir Fan treats money like dirt. I am impressed. Fan Xian knew that he was not truly admiring his clean sleeves, but rather that his house was full of gold. He smiled and said nothing. The carriage passed through the quiet and beautiful streets of Shangjing and finally arrived at the area where high officials and nobles lived. It stopped in front of Chong Ningho's manor. Shangjing was similar to the south of Jingdou in the Qing kingdom. The spring wind gently caressed the branches extending from each manor. The sunlight was blocked by the large trees overhead and dispersed. Fan Xian stood next to the carriage and looked at the street. He looked at the stone lions beside the grand doors. For some reason, he was reminded of when he had first arrived in Jingdou from Danzhou. The carriage stopped in front of Chong Ningho's manor, and with the protection of the imperial guards, it made quite a commotion. There were already some people hiding in the shadows and beginning to peep. The servants in front of the manor looked at the carriage in front of their manor and were at a loss of what to do. They did not know whether to go down and greet them, or rush into the manor to inform their master. These servants could all see that the newcomer was dressed very clearly. It was an envoy from the Qing kingdom. Who in this world had ever heard of an envoy coming to the manor of another country's minister? If this was a journey permitted by both countries, then Chong Ningho's manor would have long since made preparations. How could it be so quiet? The concierge swallowed a mouthful of saliva, wondering what the hell was going on. Could it be that these envoys did not understand the rules? Today, the envoy was not on official business, and Fan Xian had carelessly thrown off the accompanying officials from the office of the Grand Herald, so only Commander Wei was from Northern Qi. Seeing that Fan Xian and the others were about to charge into Chong Ningho's manor, Commander Wei became anxious and stepped forward to stop them. Master Fan, you must not do this. Without the permission of the court, an envoy cannot interact with a court official. If Master Fan and Chong Ningho really are on good terms, then you must not go in like this. What if you bring trouble to Chong Ningho? Chong Ningho was Empress Dowager Wei's brother. What trouble could there be? Fan Xian muttered to himself. It would be best if they could bring him trouble. His son had been hiding from him all day. But he smiled and said, It's fine, it's fine. This morning, I spoke to His Majesty in the palace, and His Majesty did not object. Why should I be afraid of people gossiping? Bringing up the Emperor of Northern Qi, Commander Wei was stunned. Did he really have to go to the palace to seek confirmation? At that moment, Fan Xian had already brought his 3 subordinates to the door of Chong Ningho's manor. The gatekeeper hurried forward to greet him. His etiquette was thorough and his words clear. Fan Xian secretly praised them. They were indeed a noble family. Could I trouble you to inform them that my drinking companion from the south has arrived? Fan Xian had finally learned some of the quintessence of this ability to be familiar with people after a year of training in the officialdom and wine circles. The gatekeeper was stunned. The Marquis had indeed gone on a diplomatic mission to the south last year, and he had heard that he had gotten drunk quite a few times in the south. Could it be this young envoy? But he did not dare to immediately inform the Marquis. After all, it was a serious matter for a foreign official to enter the manor. Just as he was in a dilemma, he suddenly heard a sound from the corner door. A man came out and bowed to Fan Xian. "The Marquis requests your presence." Fan Xian had not expected the manor to be so easy to enter. Entering the hall, he looked at the middle-aged man in the chair and laughed. He walked over and gave him a warm hug. "I have not seen you for a year, and you are even more elegant than before, Marquis." Actually, last year in the capital, he had only met this envoy from Northern Qi a few times. In the end, they had a hearty drink in the palace hall. He only vaguely remembered the man's face. Chang Ningho was the brother of the emperor, and his status was incomparably noble. He had never encountered such a warm greeting. He coughed and said with a slight headache, "I have not seen you for a year, and your reputation is even greater than before. What brings you here today?" "I entered Shangjing yesterday, and this morning I chatted with His Majesty for a while. As a matter of fact, I did not know many people in Shangjing, so of course I had to pay you a visit." Chang Ningho was born with a white face and swollen eyes. He was in his 40s or 50s, and the signs of excessive drinking could not be erased. Fan Xian was close enough to smell the alcohol on him. It seemed that he had been drinking through the night. Fan Xian was secretly happy. It seemed that he had bought the right gift. Not only was Chang Ningho fond of wine and women, but he was also a pedantic fellow. The Empress Dowager had two brothers. One of them, Chang'an, could still lead troops into battle. Although he was a defeated general, he was still better than Chang Ningho. This marquis had been holed up in the capital for many years. It was only because of his stupidity and because he had the support of his sister, the Empress Dowager, that he dared to invite Fan Xian, the envoy from Qing, into his manor. Fan Xian had come today to get closer to this brother of the Empress Dowager. He also wanted to use Chang Ningho to force out Vice Minister Wei. As expected, Marquis Chang Ning's eyes narrowed into slits as he looked at the fine wine brought by his attendants. Although he did not have a clear identity, the fact that he was the brother of the Empress Dowager was enough to make him look down on everyone in the world. Even if Fan Xian was now the commissioner of the Overwatch Council, he would not take him seriously. It was only when he heard the gatekeeper's report that he remembered the young and beautiful man who could drink. After returning to Northern Qi, he had not forgotten about his defeat, so he had invited Fan Xian into his manor. Seeing the fine wine, the Marquis was even happier. He thought that he had a good eye for people. This little Fan Xian was indeed a sensible person. According to the Overwatch Council's intelligence, this Chang Ningho was from a rural village. Although he had studied under Zhuang Mohan, his life in the Northern Qi court was not very satisfactory. The officials of Northern Qi always believed that he had relied on the Empress Dowager's nepotism to climb up, so not many people looked up to him. His reputation in the court was even lower than that of his son, Wei Hua. That was why this marquis was so fond of wine. In the middle of the day, the manor immediately prepared a table full of good dishes. Chang Ningho pulled a few foreign envoys and began to drink to their heart's content. Fan Xian narrowed his eyes slightly and drank a cup. Seeing the old man smacking his lips greedily, he laughed. "Marquis, when we entered earlier, Commander Wei said that it might be inconvenient for you. What's there to be afraid of?" Chang Ningho scolded. "Do you expect me to close the door and refuse guests? Last year in the capital, you and Xian Chiwu, Xian Darren, accompanied me very well. Today, I will accompany you. Who would dare to say anything?" Fan Xian thought to himself that this was fine. After 3 rounds of wine, Chang Ningho's pale face gradually turned red, and his eyes became a little unfocused. He knew that the man had drunk a little too much, so Fan Xian took the opportunity to ask what he wanted to ask. Hearing his words, Chang Ningho was slightly surprised. "Master Fan, you wish to see Provost Shen?" Chapter 218. Fan Xian smiled. "I heard that during the rebellion in Shangjing, you risked your life to leave the palace with a letter from the Empress Dowager. You mobilized the brocade guards under Sir Shen, and only then did you manage to salvage the situation. Since then, Sir Shen has had a successful career as an official, and he has always been on good terms with you, so I would like you to introduce me to him." This was the only glorious event in Chong Ningho's life. Chong Ningho was already drunk, and now his face was flushed. He was even more drunk than before, and his expression was one of pride. But no matter how stupid he was, he could tell that something was amiss. He hiccuped and stared at Fan Xian strangely. "Sir Fan, you are an envoy. Going to see the provost of the Discipline Commission. This is somewhat improper." Fan Xian frowned. "As you know, there are always many inconveniences for an envoy in a foreign land." He lowered his voice and said, "To tell you the truth, I have offended a large number of officials in Jingdo. Even His Majesty could not protect me, so he used this diplomatic mission as an excuse to kick me to Northern Qi." Chong Ningho nodded and hiccuped. His heart was full of sorrow. Last year, when Northern Qi lost the war, all the nobles related to the Empress Dowager were roasted on the stove, so Chong Ningho was demoted and sent home. As the Empress Dowager's brother, he was kicked to the south to sign that humiliating treaty. Fan Xian's offending of a large number of civil officials in the south was truly shocking. The Prime Minister of the South had been removed, the Director of the Board of Rights had been hanged, and 16 high-ranking officials had been executed. The civil service case had caused such a ruckus that even the officials of Northern Qi knew about it, so Chong Ningho believed that Fan Xian was telling the truth. "But why do you want to see the provost of the Discipline Commission?" Chong Ningho was in a bit of a dilemma. He really did not know what this young official wanted. "I want to get rich. Does Master Marquis want that?" Hearing the word "get rich," Chong Ningho was immediately interested. "Business." Fan Xian filled Master Ho's cup. There was no one else around the banquet, only the old man and the young man. Fan Xian spoke in a low voice. "Master Ho, you must have heard that I will take over the palace treasury in the south by the year after next. At least 40% of the treasury's business is sent to the north, so I must build a good relationship with the Discipline Commission. Otherwise, how can I ensure my safety along the way?" Chong Ningho looked at him, his heart filled with shock. He instinctively shouted, "You're trying to smuggle." Fan Xian raised his index finger to his lips and smiled. Drinking a mouthful of wine, he said, "Marquis, do you think we should do this business?" Chong Ningho had already sobered up quite a bit. Half of it was from the shock, and the other half was from the joy. What did the Qing kingdom rely on for its recent rise? Isn't it just the businesses left behind by the Yi family? If he could turn the interests of the Southern Imperial Court into his personal interests, what kind of number would that be? However, Chong Ningho still found it hard to believe. Could this young Southern official really be so daring? Chong Ningho thought about it for a long time. If Fan Xian wanted to smuggle, he indeed needed to build a good relationship with the Discipline Commission. As for the drawbacks, there was not a single one. In any case, Fan Xian was greedy for the money in the Qing kingdom's treasury. The Northern Qi kingdom would suffer no loss at all. If he smuggled, the prices of those goods would fall, and the palace would save a great deal of money. The Empress Dowager and the Emperor's nephew would probably wake up laughing. Why wouldn't he do something like this that harmed others to benefit himself? Chong Ningho fiercely drank a mouthful of wine.
Deal.
"I'll arrange for you to meet with Old Shin, but what? Fan Xian, I must say this. I must get the palace's approval for this." "That won't do," Fan Xian said resolutely and decisively. "I have already said enough today. Originally, it was just the three of us getting rich. If the Marquis plays this game, then wouldn't my head be tied to the belt of the Northern Qi court?" Chong Ningho knew that Fan Xian's words were reasonable, but he still smiled bitterly. "I don't dare to take responsibility for such an important matter." "Then please consider it, Marquis," said Fan Xian coldly. Fan Xian said coldly, "However, this matter involves the lives of my family, so the Marquis' mouth must be sealed." A vicious look suddenly flashed in Fan Xian's eyes. Chong Ningho saw this look, but the Marquis was not afraid at all. Instead, he laughed coldly and thought to himself, "You, a civil official, actually want to play such underhanded tricks. You're no match for the Discipline Commission." Perhaps Chong Ningho had been shocked by the huge amount of money that could be brought about by smuggling, but he had forgotten Fan Xian's true identity, which was very similar to that of the Discipline Commission. Fan Xian looked at Chang Ningho's expression and knew that his bait today was just about enough. He chuckled and changed the subject. He told Chang Ningho about the conflict between the diplomatic mission and Chang Ningho's manor and asked Chang Ningho to help mediate. Chang Ningho's mind was occupied with arranging for Fan Xian to meet with Commander Shin and thinking about how to enter the palace and persuade the Empress Dowager to do this profitable business. Hearing Fan Xian's words, he naturally agreed. That brother of mine doesn't know how to do proper business, he scolded. He only knows how to cause trouble. Don't worry, I'll handle this matter. Not having eaten and drank to his heart's content, Envoy Fan left the manor and boarded the carriage, preparing to return to the diplomatic mission. Just then, he suddenly heard the hurried sound of hooves in front of him. It stopped next to the carriage. Fan Xian lifted the curtain and saw that it was indeed the eldest son of Chang Ningho's family, Wei Hua, the vice minister of the office of the Grand Herald, who had hurried back. He couldn't help but smile. It seemed that he had accomplished all 4 of his goals by delivering gifts to Chang Ningho's manor. Master Fan, what exactly do you want to do? Wei Hua gritted his teeth and lowered his voice to speak to Fan Xian, who stood by the carriage window. Fan Xian burped, and the sour smell made Wei Hua quickly cover his nose. He smiled and used his palm to clear the air. Your father and I were drinking buddies in the past. Since I've come to Shangjing today, of course I had to pay him a visit. Wei Hua was both angry and angry. You are an envoy of a country, and your words and actions will attract attention. If you truly wish to visit friends and relatives, you must do so after the affairs of the country have concluded. Then, the office of the Grand Herald will make the arrangements, or you can request an edict from the palace through the Ministry of Rights. If your sudden visit is noticed by the court officials, how will my father explain it to the palace tomorrow? Fan Xian laughed. The Marquis is a free and easy man. He doesn't care about such things. The vice minister's elegance is a far cry from your father's. Wei Hua suppressed the anger in his chest and swallowed his anger. Everyone knows that my father loves to drink. Master Fan, what exactly do you want to do? The drunkenness in Fan Xian's eyes disappeared, and he looked at Wei Hua calmly. The indifference in his eyes made Wei Hua feel a little uncomfortable. What do I want to do? I want to introduce a business deal to your father. Wei Hua didn't know what he meant, but his intuition told him that it was extremely dangerous. He placed his hand on the window frame of the envoy's carriage and frowned. Master Fan, if you have something to say, please say it. I'm looking for you today. You're hiding. Fan Xian looked at him with a faint smile. I'm looking for the vice provost, but he's not at the Ministry of Rights. I'd like to ask, who should I look for? Wei Hua replied awkwardly. Aren't the envoys of your country currently in discussion with the Ministry of Rights? The border is being demarcated, and so is the prisoner exchange. Fan Xian looked him in the eye and said coldly, but as the vice minister of the office of the Grand Herald, you should know what I want to do. Don't think about delaying it any longer. I must see him by tomorrow. Wei Hua said, the procedures are complicated. Do you think you can see him so easily?
Fine.
I'll come see your father tomorrow. Fan Xian was so angry that he laughed. Drink, talk, and then discuss business. Such a life as an envoy can be considered a happy one. With that said, the carriage began to move. Under the escort of the Northern Qi army, it happily made its way back to the encampment. Wei Hua angrily threw the horsewhip to the servant and walked into the manor. Along the way, he asked when Fan Xian had come and what he had done. After hearing that Commander Wei had accompanied him all the way, his heart calmed a little. Presumably, the Emperor's officials would not be able to use this matter to make a fuss. Entering the reception hall, Wei Hua saw that Marquis Chang Ning was still enjoying his wine. Wei Hua was furious, but he suppressed his emotions and respectfully bowed to Marquis Chang Ning. Seeing that his most promising son had returned, Chang Ningho smiled and said, Come. We have a guest today. It's that Fan Xian I've always mentioned. Hey, that kid, he actually managed to get 2 jars of the liquor from the Xiushui street store. Wei Hua finally couldn't take it anymore. He sighed and said, Father, he's an envoy from an enemy country. Who knows how many people in the court are watching our Chongningho and Chongningho families? Could you? Before he could finish, Chongningho was already howling. What? I'm the Empress Dowager's brother. Can I have a guest at home? That's no ordinary guest. He's an envoy from the kingdom of Qing. Wei Hua's voice grew louder. It's precisely because our family is different from others that, for the sake of my aunt's reputation, you shouldn't have let Fan Xian through the door today. For some reason, as soon as Wei Hua became fierce, Chong Ningho softened. He hugged his wine cup, his face full of misery, and said with a sobbing tone, "What face? From the day your aunt entered the palace, your father, I have lost all face.
Who am I?
I'm Zhuang Mohan's student. But in the eyes of others, what am I? Look at all the years I've been in the capital. Which official in the court was willing to visit me? Those who came to visit me were all those shameless things. I'm sick of them." Chapter 219. It wasn't easy for an envoy to visit me, Chong Ningho said in a trembling voice. Son, don't be fooled by the fact that I am the Empress Dowager's brother, but that is Fan Xian, the immortal poet Fan Xian. I am proud of him. Wei Hua's heart gradually grew sour. He knew that although his family lived a life of luxury and had considerable power in the northern Qi court, which placed great importance on reputation, they had always had a bad reputation. He had endured to the position of Vice Minister of the Office of the Grand Herald and had finally silenced some of the petty people, but there were still people who believed that this was a gift from the palace to the Empress Dowager's relatives.
He sighed.
He knew that his father had studied under Zhuang Mohan and was prepared to help the world. But because of his aunt, he could only be an idle marquis. These many years of depression could be washed away with a cup of wine, so he didn't say anything more. But thinking of what Fan Xian had said before he left, he was still a little afraid. Fan Xian said he wanted to do business with you? He is the commissioner of the Overwatch Council. What business can he do? And what business does he have that requires your presence? Chong Ningho replied, I am just a middleman. The person he really needs is Sir Shen. Uncle Shen?
Correct.
Fan Xian's father is the Minister of Revenue, and he has the status of a fake princess consort. In the future, he will be in charge of the eldest princess palace treasury business. It seems that he intends to do something. If I don't have your Uncle Shen's protection and escort, I won't be able to do this shady business for long. Wei Hua was just as shocked as his father when he first heard this news.
His jaw dropped.
Is he planning to smuggle? This is a trap. This was Wei Hua's first reaction. He has no need to threaten me. Chong Ningho shook his head in disagreement. Wei Hua grew anxious. You don't know, but there is an agreement between the two countries. Fan Xian is anxious about this matter, and His Majesty wants us to stall for as many days as we can, until the Qing diplomatic mission is anxious. With this, regardless of whether this business is real or not, if you really arrange for him to meet with Sir Shen, we won't be able to escape. If Fan Xian comes looking for me again, how am I supposed to stall? Do we have to stall because His Majesty says so? Chong Ningho looked at his son. In any case, that person is going to be released. If we can get something out of it, then we should help Fan Xian. What are you afraid of? Your aunt is still in the palace. Wei Hua sighed and didn't know what to say. A moment later, he asked in a small voice, Do you think what Fan Xian said is true? I really don't understand why he would take such a big risk to smuggle goods into Daki. People die for wealth, and birds die for food. Chong Ningho was still tipsy and thought he had seen through the hearts of the world. He laughed mockingly. The palace treasury? What a big steamed bun. Unfortunately, it did not belong to the Fan family. Even if his father was the Minister of Revenue in the Qing Kingdom, how much benefit could he get from the national treasury? If Fan Xian really does smuggle the palace treasury goods to the north to sell, do you know how big of a sum it will be? Wei Hua was clever and quick-witted. With a slight frown, he had a rough estimate. Over the past decade, the Kingdom of Qing had been supported by the businesses left behind by the Yi family. At the same time, it had earned a lot of money from other parts of the world. If Fan Xian really did have the ability to do such a thing, then the profits that could be made from it would be terrifying. Fan Xian embezzled this kind of money? Wei Hua seemed to have a hard time connecting the legendary Fan Xian with this kind of corrupt person he had just heard. Chong Ningho tilted his face and poured himself another cup of strong wine. He belched. What do you think? Poets also have to eat. Having said this once great scholar of Northern Qi, now a vermin of Northern Qi, lay down on the table and fell into a deep sleep. His body was covered in wine, and there was an unpleasant smell. In the carriage, Wang Qinian looked at Ling Jing, who was pretending to be asleep, and gave Fan Xian a look of disapproval. It seemed that the commissioner should not be so bold as to talk about smuggling in front of a court official. Fan Xian laughed. You don't really believe it, do you? Wang Qinian really did believe it, and so did Gouda. If anyone could completely control the palace treasury, they could sell those glass jars for countless times the profit. How could they not be tempted? Fan Xian was not tempted because to the eldest princess, the palace treasury belonged to the court. And to Fan Xian, the palace treasury belonged to the Yi family. It was his. At least one day, it would completely become his. Stealing his own goods and selling them to the north for a low price. Only an idiot would do such a thing. But the problem was that no one knew Fan Xian's true thoughts. No one knew the historical connection between Fan Xian and the so-called royal merchant of the palace treasury. So everyone who heard Fan Xian's plan thought that the son of the Fan family really wanted to dig out a gold mine that belonged to him alone from the Golden Mountain that was the palace treasury. Fan Xian did not want to dig at all. He just wanted to enclose the entire mountain. Don't pretend to be asleep. Fan Xian yawned, feeling a little tired. Next to him, Ling Jing opened his eyes awkwardly and looked at Fan Xian with some fear. Although he was the deputy, the young official in front of him was not only the head envoy, but also the commissioner of that terrifying yamen of the Overwatch Council. Fan Xian did not shy away from talking about illegal business in front of him. It was hard to say that he would not cause an accident on his way back home. Fan Xian looked at him amused. He patted him on the shoulder. Are you stupid? I'm saying it in front of you, because I'm not afraid of you knowing. When you go back tonight, write something down and send it back to the capital. Don't worry, the court will understand what I mean. Even if the court didn't understand, as long as the emperor did. Ling Jing forced himself to believe that the young man in front of him would not become the most corrupt official in the history of the kingdom of Qing. He swallowed to moisten his dry throat. Sir, why did you come to Ningho's manor today? First, to build a good relationship with the Empress Dowager of Northern Qi. It seems that the Emperor of Northern Qi is taking care of the diplomatic mission. Fan Xian lowered his head and closed his eyes, feeling sleepy. At the same time, let Ningho deal with the matter at the entrance of the diplomatic mission. After all, he beat up the precious brat of the Marquis of Northern Qi. It has to be dealt with. Hearing the words precious brat, Wang Qinian and Gouda smiled at the same time. They felt that Fan Xian was right, so that it doesn't affect the official business of this diplomatic mission. Third, if I want to see Sir Shen, I can only do it through Ningho. Fourth, I want to scare Wei Hua. Whether or not the manor believes the food I threw out, I'm sure he'll secretly speed up the process. Why do you have to go through all this trouble to see Commander Shen? Ling Jing frowned. He's a high-ranking official, different from Ningho. Northern Qi won't allow it. So, it depends on what Ningho thinks. Even if he doesn't see him, there's no harm. Fan Xian opened his eyes and yawned again. As for why I want to see him, that's council business. It's not convenient to tell you, Sir Lin. Ling Jing shivered. Remembering Fan Xian's true identity, he fell silent. Fan Xian yawned again. He had been yawning all the way in the carriage. It seemed that he was exhausted. After entering the palace today, he hadn't had any time to rest. What do we do later? Wang Qinian whispered. We're in enemy Shangjing after all. We're in the dark. Should we contact the eyes and ears of the 4th Bureau in Shangjing? I said no. Fan Xian stuffed his fist into his mouth, forcibly stifling the yawn that was about to escape his lips. He replied tiredly, Don't let those spies take risks. It's not time yet. What do we do later? Just sleep. Tomorrow, we'll wait for Wei Hua to take us to see Yan Bingyun. He squeezed the stiff envelope in his clothes, and a trace of worry appeared between his brows. After reading the letter, Fan Xian's palm tightened, and he ruthlessly crushed the paper into pieces. This was a habit he had developed in the Tsang Mountains. The pieces had already become powder. Even if the intelligence experts of the Second Bureau of the Overwatch Council collected them, they would not be able to recover them. The letter was written by a man named Huang Yi. Fan Xian had heard of this name before. He was an advisor of the eldest princess in the Li Palace in Xinyang. In the Overwatch Council's most confidential intelligence report, it was made clear that this scholar had an ambiguous relationship with the eldest princess. Save, save, save. I'm not some youth trying to put out a fire. Fan Xian laughed bitterly. Only now did he realize the complicated relationship behind the matter. Chun Pingping clearly didn't know that Xiaoan had the secret of the temple, and neither did the eldest princess. So the starting point of their actions was very simple and clear. Chun Pingping wanted Yan Bingyun to return and Xiaoan to die because he didn't like the idea of another old enemy in the north. He also believed that this was an excellent opportunity for Fan Xian's growth. The eldest princess didn't care about Yan Bingyun's life or death, but she wanted Xiaoan to live and regain control of the Brocade Guard. She liked to see Shang Shanhu and Xiaoan, a pair of powerful men, standing between the Empress Dowager and the Emperor of Northern Qi. Looking for an opening, they would make the Northern Kingdom even more uncomfortable. Although he didn't know the eldest princess's overall plan, Fan Xian was certain that his mother-in-law, who was far away in Xinyang, had reached some sort of secret agreement with Shang Shanhu. Otherwise, she wouldn't have invested so much. The eldest princess didn't know about the letter and hadn't discovered the matter of the night in Guangxin Palace. But Fan Xian was a black-clothed man hiding in the dark. He naturally wanted to keep a respectful distance from the eldest princess, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Now, far away in a foreign country, he received her letter. He couldn't help but feel that it was absurd. After all, what did this have to do with Fan Xian? Chapter 220. News gathered from all sides, through all sorts of channels, gathered in that courtyard in the southwest corner of Shangjing. The diplomatic mission confirmed that Xiaoan had already secretly entered Shangjing. As for where he was being held, perhaps only the mother and son in the palace, as well as Master Shen of the Discipline Commission, knew. It was strange to say that the Northern Qi royal court had welcomed Xiaoan with great fanfare at Wudu, but the return to the capital was completely silent. Presumably, Shang Shanhu and those who wanted Xiaoan dead were still engaged in a tug-of-war. For Fan Xian, Xiaoan's life and death were not within the scope of his consideration. To be more precise, once he entered Shangjing, Fan Xian had no way of knowing whether Xiaoan lived or died until he had enough confidence to mobilize the hidden forces in the north. Unless Wu Zhu came, or rather, unless Wu Zhu brought the chest to Fan Xian. This was another question that had been plaguing Fan Xian. Why did the usually cold and inhuman Uncle Wu Zhu insist on not entering the north? Could it be that there was someone on this land he did not wish to see? On the other hand, it was clear that Fan Xian's proposal to Chang Ningho was beginning to take effect. That proposal contained great benefits, and it had successfully enticed some people. A meeting with Master Shen of the Discipline Commission had also been secretly arranged. Fan Xian knew that although these things seemed to be secretive, his mother in the palace in Shangjing would certainly be watching all of this from the shadows. She would not completely trust Fan Xian, but he had to try. Fan Xian did not trust him at all, but he had thrown out the bait, and he always hoped to catch something. On the surface, it seemed that Wei Shaoqing was still stalling, but in reality, both sides of the negotiation had already felt that the process was gradually speeding up. Although it was still a little behind the bottom line that Fan Xian had strongly requested, on a fine sunny day, the Chamberlain of Dependencies and the Discipline Commission secretly issued a joint document, and the diplomatic mission finally had the opportunity to meet with Yan Bingyun. That day, the sky was clear, and there was not a single cloud in the porcelain blue sky. Fan Xian put his hand on the awning, shielding himself from the blazing sun. His lips curled into a smile, and he thought of the opening he often used in elementary school in his previous life. He was very happy, and also a little excited. During the journey, before the deal was made, the darkness hidden in the deepest part of his heart had almost made him make certain trades. Fortunately, none of this had become reality. Just as he had said a long time ago, Fan Xian admired this young Master Yen, whom he had never met before. He admired him very much. A son of a high-ranking official was able to give up glory, splendor, wealth, and travel to a faraway foreign country. With great difficulty, he took on the role of a spy on the northern border, and he had done an exceptional job, successfully infiltrating the upper echelons of northern Qi. Just from this, Fan Xian knew that this Master Yen was in many ways more outstanding than he was. The place where Yan Bingyun was imprisoned was a heavily guarded manor on the outskirts of Shangjing. Not far from the manor was a military camp, and both inside and outside the manor were guarded by the brocade guards of northern Qi. Yan Bingyun was imprisoned in a heavily guarded manor on the outskirts of Shangjing. Not far from the manor was a military camp, and both the inside and outside of the manor were guarded by the northern Qi brocade guard. This building was not as antique as the other buildings in Shangjing. It was purely made of hard stone and did not have a courtyard. Looking from the corner tower, one would be able to see all the moving objects on the lawn. It was really a good place to imprison people. Today, Fan Xian had only brought Wang Qinian to visit Yan Bingyun. Gao belonged to the Tiger Guards, and Lin Jing and Lin Wen belonged to the office of the Grand Herald. They had little to do with the affairs of the Overwatch Council, so it was not convenient for them to come. Wei Hua spoke to Fan Xian calmly. Master Fan, look at this place. The birds are singing, the flowers are fragrant, the grass is flat, and the wind is soft. Our court treats your people well, doesn't it? Fan Xian's expression was even colder than his. Even if it's a paradise, after living here for a long time, it's still just a prison. The vice provost of the brocade guard spoke. Even if it's a prison, it's still much more comfortable than the dungeons of the Overwatch Council. This high-ranking official of the brocade guard thought of the wretched state the old man had been in when his subordinates had picked up Xiao and at the border. Fan Xian frowned. He hated this vice provost the most. After the diplomatic mission entered the capital, he should have been the one to liaise with the two sides. Who knew that he would go into hiding? Fan Xian still had not figured out the official positions in northern Qi. He was clearly a member of the brocade guard, so why was the leader called the provost of the discipline commission, while his subordinate spy was called the provost? When he first heard this name, he almost thought that he was from the military. What's the point of talking so much? I want to go in and see someone. Fan Xian looked at the provost coldly. Shaowen had suffered in the south for 20 years, but after Yan Bingyun had been captured, who knew how much torture he had endured? It was already not easy for him to live this long. Before meeting Yan Bingyun, Fan Xian had already imagined many scenes. For example, Yan Bingyun would be hung on a rack, his skin split open, his fingers pierced by 10 steel needles, his toenails stripped bare, revealing the tender flesh underneath, his smooth skin scorched by a soldering iron, and even his youthful gums had already entered the stage of old age, completely bald. Of course, this was the worst possible scenario. Fan Xian had also imagined that Yan Bingyun might be sitting on a soft couch, surrounded by brocade quilts, with 4 or 5 northern Qi beauties with bare legs and half-exposed breasts surrounding him, feeding him grapes. The grape juice dripped onto Yan Bingyun's extremely supple chest, and the beauties next to him carefully dabbed it with a soft towel. Of course, this was the worst possible scenario. There was also a strange imagination that lingered in Fan Xian's mind. Perhaps when he first met Yan Bingyun, he would pounce on him like a wounded tiger, ready to tear him to pieces, snot and tears running down his face, as he complained that the people in the council had not cared about his life, and that the people of the motherland had come too late. Of course, this was the least likely scenario. But no matter how he imagined it, when Fan Xian walked into the room, he still felt that the human imagination was quite lacking, and that his own was not that strong either. He looked at the young man sitting on the chair and opened his mouth slightly in shock. He had not expected Yan Bingyun's current situation to be like this. Vice Minister Wei and the Vice Provost clearly had not expected this either, and they opened their mouths to cry out in surprise. The room was decorated simply and elegantly. There was a large bed, a desk, and a few other everyday furnishings. It did not look like a torture chamber, but more like a home. Fan Xian did not know if Northern Qi knew he was coming and had arranged this at the last minute. His eyes were only fixed on the chair. Sitting on the chair was a young man with a cold expression. This young man was extremely handsome, with thin lips and sharp eyebrows. In terms of physiognomy, he was an extremely fickle person. To everyone's surprise, there was a young lady lying on the young man's lap. The young lady's soft sobs echoed in the quiet room. Fan Xian finally closed his astonished mouth tightly, but his heart was a mess. He smiled bitterly as he thought about how he and his entourage had been so worried about the head spy of the Qing kingdom. How could they have known that in this cell there would be a romantic drama and not the scene of 007 being tortured as he had imagined? The young man on the chair was Yan Bingyun. When he noticed that a few people had walked in from outside, and that 2 of them were wearing Qing official robes, he frowned. Just like that, a cold aura began to permeate the room. This coldness even startled the sobbing girl lying on Yan Bingyun's lap. The girl raised her head in surprise and looked back at the people at the door. Only now did Fan Xian realize that the girl had delicate features, and there was a sense of gentleness between her brows. Presumably, she was the daughter of a wealthy family, but he did not know how she had come to be in such a heavily guarded cell. "Miss Shen?" Wei Hua was shocked and yelled, "Guards, escort the young lady out." "Shen?" Fan Xian frowned again, feeling that things were getting more and more interesting. A few brocade guards rushed in from outside the door. Wei Hua's face was ashen as he scolded. "What are you doing? How could you let Miss Shen come to such a dangerous place?" The vice provost's face was also full of anger, and he slapped them across the face. After a few slaps, the brocade guards responsible for guarding the important criminals covered their faces and walked to Miss Shen's side, not daring to reach out. "Miss Shen, if you still don't leave, don't blame me for being rough." The vice provost bowed to Miss Shen. Wei Hua also walked to her side and advised gently, "Little sister Shen, it's better to return. Otherwise, if Uncle Shen finds out about this matter, he won't beat you to death." Fan Xian's gaze did not meet Yan Bingyun's. He only quietly looked at the girl on Yan Bingyun's knees. This girl's surname was Shen, and to be able to enter the manor that was heavily guarded by the Northern Qi brocade guards, there was no need to ask. She had to be the young lady of Sir Shen's family. But he did not know what relationship this Miss Shen had with Yan Bingyun. Fan Xian smiled bitterly and thought to himself, could it be that our great master Yan is using a honey trap? Miss Shen quietly stood up and looked at Yan Bingyun, who had not said a word. A crazy and vicious hatred slowly appeared in her gentle eyes. Biting her lip, she said, word by word, "I only want you to tell me one thing. Which of what you said before was true?" Yan Bingyun tilted his head slightly and looked back with his emotionless eyes. Quietly, he said, "I am an employee of the 4th Bureau of the Qing Overwatch Council. Miss Shen should know very well that none of what I said was true." Wei Hua glanced at Fan Xian, who had been watching coldly from the side. Afraid that if the young lady continued to speak, these southern officials would laugh at her. He quickly ordered people to drag Miss Shen out. Miss Shen coldly shook off the hands of the brocade guards. Looking at Yan Bingyun, who remained unmoving in his chair, she said miserably, "Good, good. What a sentimental Yan Bingyun." Chapter 2:21. What a sentimental Yan Bingyun. These earnest words were filled with heartbreak and despair. Even Fan Xian, who had a heart of steel, could not help but sigh when he heard this. Wei Hua's face was filled with rage. He looked at Yan Bingyun, who was sitting calmly in his chair, as if he wanted to immediately tear this enemy spy to pieces. Following a series of barely audible sobs, Miss Shen was finally invited out of the manor cell. Fan Xian sighed again. What a sentimental woman. Even though he said this, he had many doubts in his heart. Even if that young lady was the daughter of Xinzhong, the head of the brocade guard in northern Qi, and even if Yan Bingyun had some sort of emotional entanglement with her during his years in northern Qi, who was Yan Bingyun? She was the highest-ranking spy of the Qing kingdom that northern Qi had captured in the past 15 years. How could they have allowed Miss Shen to walk in and put on a show in front of the Qing kingdom's envoys? Suddenly, he understood what his counterparts in the north were thinking. The cell, which did not look like a prison cell, was much quieter. Sitting in his chair, Yan Bingyun did not stand up. He only poured himself a cup of tea and slowly sipped it. This powerful figure, who had been hiding in northern Qi for many years, had a frosty expression on his face. He gave off the feeling that he did not care about anything, not even his own life or death. Wei Hua seemed to have calmed down from his earlier anger. He looked at Yan Bingyun and frowned. "Mr. Yan, no matter how you look at it, we have been good friends for the past 2 years. We all serve our respective countries, and this is not a big deal. But please remember, there are some things that I can never forgive. After you leave this time, please remember not to set foot in northern Qi again. His Majesty has already sent a secret edict through Master Shen. If you dare set foot in northern Qi again, northern Qi will cut off your head, even if it costs the lives of 3,000 cavalrymen." Yan Bingyun half lowered his head, as if he had not heard what Wei Hua had said. His fingers gently played with the handle of his teacup. Ever since his identity had been exposed last year and he had been imprisoned, this great scholar Yun, who had once been a social figure in Shangjing, seemed to have become a natural mute. "Today, I am here to see him," Fan Xian said expressionlessly to Wei Hua. Fan Xian expressionlessly said to Wei Hua, "I need a specific date. When can I take him back to the diplomatic mission?" "He can't return to the diplomatic mission, so he can only sneak out of Shangjing. Do you know how many people in Shangjing want to tear your Lord Yan's fresh meat apart?" Wei Hua said coldly. Fan Xian shook his head. "His Majesty has decreed that I must bring Sir Yan back to the diplomatic mission. As for the cover-up, we will do it. Do you think we want to stir up unnecessary trouble?" Wei Hua frowned. He knew that Xiao En and Si Lily had already entered Shangjing. In this secret agreement, the Qing kingdom had already made the first move. They could not delay any longer. Furthermore, Fan Xian's intrusion into his manor had indeed provoked much criticism. But his seemingly absurd proposal had, for some reason, moved the people of the palace, as well as Master Shen, who held a great deal of power in his hands. "I'll get the paperwork done right away." Fan Xian nodded calmly and said, "Can you make things easier for me? I would like to speak with Sir Yan alone." Wei Hua frowned. If Fan Xian really wanted to discuss something, he could have waited until Yan Bingyun returned to the diplomatic mission. Wouldn't that have been more secretive? After thinking about it, he still had no idea what Fan Xian wanted. He nodded and signaled for the vice provost to leave with him. Only Fan Xian, Wang Qinian and Yan Bingyun, who had his head half lowered and was incomparably cold, remained in the room. Fan Xian had no self-awareness that he was in the prison of an enemy nation's brocade guard. With a warm smile on his face, he dragged a chair and sat in front of Yan Bingyun. Looking at the young man's handsome face, he said, "I am Fan Xian." Fan Xian knew that before Yan Bingyun was arrested, he had already entered the capital. As the head of the Overwatch Council in the north, Yan Bingyun must have heard of his name. As expected, after hearing Fan Xian's name, Yan Bingyun's fingers slowly left the slippery handle of the teacup. He raised his head and looked at Fan Xian, but his eyes were full of mockery and disdain, which surprised Fan Xian. Fan Xian? The illegitimate son of the Minister of Revenue, Fan Jian. He grew up in Danzhou, likes to drink, has no talent, that's all. Yan Bingyun spoke again. His voice was soft and gentle, completely at odds with the cold expression on his face. "What are you doing here?" Fan Xian sighed. "I say, Sir Yan, you've been locked up for over half a year. The world has changed a lot. First of all, my father has become the Minister of Revenue. Secondly, the untalented me is now the head envoy of the diplomatic mission. My main purpose in coming to northern Qi is to bring you back home." For some reason, Yan Bingyun seemed to loathe the name Fan Xian. Fan Xian didn't understand why. Bring me back home? Yan Bingyun slowly raised his head again. He was only in his 20s, but his eyebrows were already mixed with a few strands of silver, giving him a strange appearance.
Who are you?
Why should I believe you? I am Fan Xian, the commissioner of the Overwatch Council. Fan Xian knew that as the head of the Secret Service, Yan Bingyun would be very careful. Yan Bingyun must still be wondering whether or not Fan Xian was a Qi spy. So, he took the token from his waist and waved it in front of Yan Bingyun's eyes. Yan Bingyun's eyes swept over the wooden token, and he frowned. He knew that this token was extremely difficult to forge, but he still couldn't believe that this man in front of him, who was even younger than him, had become the commissioner of the council. The commissioner was a transcendent existence under the director. The 8 bureaus were not under his jurisdiction, but in reality, they were all restricted by him. And during this half a year of imprisonment, Yan Bingyun had long since sealed off his mind. He wouldn't believe anything that seemed unreasonable. He didn't dare take any risks, because any information he revealed could completely destroy Qing's spy network in northern Qi. This was a serious matter, and he had to be careful. Wang Qinian, who had been silent all this time, stepped forward and said quietly, Sir Yan, Sir Fan is the newly appointed commissioner. He came north specifically to rescue you from prison. Yan Bingyun looked at Wang Qinian coldly. You are Sir Wang of the First Bureau? That's right. Facing Yan Bingyun, who had been sitting peacefully on the chair, Wang Qinian did not know why he felt a little nervous. When he thought about how Yan Bingyun had already been locked up for half a year, Wang Qinian did not know whether to admire or pity him. I don't need you to confirm my identity. Fan Xian gently patted Yan Bingyun on the shoulder and smiled. This matter is almost over. You can keep quiet and follow the diplomatic mission back home. Don't speak until you see Chen Pingping or your father. I think that will make you feel more at ease. Hearing this, Yan Bingyun frowned. He knew that this could not be a scheme of Northern Qi. But Fan Xian saw something strange in Yan Bingyun's frown. His face grew cold, and he carefully reached out to Yan Bingyun's collar. Yan Bingyun raised his head and looked at him. There was a hint of ridicule in his cold eyes. You want to see? He asked softly.
Yes.
Fan Xian calmly grunted. Then he slowly pulled open Yan Bingyun's white robe. The robe was as plain as the clouds and as white as snow. As the cloth separated from Yan Bingyun's body, there was a very faint tearing sound. Yan Bingyun's expression didn't change. Not even his eyebrows twitched. Fan Xian's expression grew unsightly. Underneath the white robe was the horrifying skin on Yan Bingyun's neck. It was covered in red and purple scars. Clearly, they were new flesh. It seemed that he had been resting for a long time to recover to his present state. There were so many wounds on his neck alone. One could only imagine what kind of torture Yan Bingyun had endured under the cover of this loose, white robe. Wang Qinian cursed a few times. Fan Xian's expression returned to normal. Looking at Yan Bingyun's cold face, he asked, How long has it been since you've been tortured? 3 months, Yan Bingyun replied with a smile. Yan Bingyun replied with a smile. It seemed that this body, which had suffered half a year of terrifying torture, was not his. Fan Xian carefully tidied up his collar and sighed. Northern Qi knew when we would arrive, so they stopped for 3 months. After 3 months, the wounds are still so terrible. Sir Yan, you have suffered. Yan Bingyun looked at him lightly. It seemed that he was not satisfied with the commissioner's words. It seems that your concern is unnecessary, he said coldly. Fan Xian was speechless. He didn't know what to say. He had only wanted to express his concern, but he had been ridiculed as not being professional enough. Before the agreement is confirmed, I won't say anything. Yan Bingyun looked into Fan Xian's eyes. I'm just curious. What method did the court use to rescue me from the hands of Northern Qi? Without waiting for Fan Xian and Wang Qinian to reply, Yan Bingyun took a deep breath. Don't tell me that the court would be stupid enough to trade the grasslands of Qianlong Bay for a useless person like me. Don't worry. Even if I was willing, His Majesty wouldn't be so stupid. Fan Xian shook his head helplessly. He explained the general contents of the agreement to Yan Bingyun. The room suddenly sank into a strange silence. Yan Bingyun lowered his head and didn't speak for a long time. Fan Xian looked at him. Suddenly, he heard Yan Bingyun mutter to himself, "Using Xiao and to trade for me?
Idiot."
Yan Bingyun suddenly raised his head and stared at Fan Xian with a mocking and angry gaze. But he still calmly suppressed his voice to a whisper. Chapter 222. Yan Bingyun, who had always maintained an inhuman calmness, was indeed an excellent spy. But the fury he had exploded in that instant was proof of his power and control as the head of the Qing Kingdom's spies in northern Qi. Faced with the flames of anger shooting out of the prisoner's eyes, even Fan Xian unconsciously wanted to dodge. Yan Bingyun's lips trembled. In a low voice, he spoke quickly, like an exploding firecracker. He moved closer to Fan Xian's ear. "Is Xiao En still under control?" Fan Xian shook his head. After Wudu, he was handed over to the brocade guard of northern Qi. "I suppose he has already entered the capital. Is there any way to kill him?"
"No."
"Did you get the secret out of his mouth?" Fan Xian shivered. He pulled away from Yan Bingyun and looked at him calmly. "You know the secret he's talking about?" Yan Bingyun looked at the young commissioner in front of him, and a strange smile appeared on his lips. "I've been in northern Qi for 4 years. Naturally, I know that the northern Qi royal family has always been obsessed with Xiao En. Although I don't know the specifics of that secret, for the northern Qi royal family to place such importance on it, it can't be simple." After a pause, Yan Bingyun suddenly said, "Do you know who Xiao En is?" Fan Xian nodded and smiled. "I believe I know more than anyone else." Yan Bingyun quickly cursed. "Since you know, how could you allow such a thing to happen?" Fan Xian looked at him calmly. "The intentions of His Majesty and the director are clear. Xiao En is old, and you are still young. So, in this deal, we have the advantage." Yan Bingyun once again fell silent. He had not expected that because of him, the Qing royal court would be willing to use Xiao En in exchange. But this reality made the commander of the northern spies feel a sense of defeat. Being captured alive by the brocade guard of northern Qi was already a humiliation, and now the royal court had to pay such a heavy price. Without a doubt, it was even more humiliating. He was very disappointed. His body, shrouded in his white robe, seemed to shrink. Fan Xian looked at him calmly.
"You are a smart man.
Since this matter has already been decided, you must return to the south safely. That way we won't lose too much." Yan Bingyun was cold and speechless. He knew that this commissioner of the Overwatch Council, who had appeared out of nowhere, had said the most correct thing to say. "3 days later, I will wait for you at the mission." Fan Xian smiled and walked outside by side with Wang Qinian. Accompanied by Wei Hua and the vice provost, they boarded the carriage and returned to the diplomatic mission. After returning to the diplomatic mission, the people of the kingdom of Qing gathered together to sort out the events of the past few days. Then they dispersed, leaving only Fan Xian and Wang Qinian. Fan Xian rested his chin on his hand and sank into deep thought. Wang Qinian asked carefully, "Master Fan, what are you thinking about? Why did Miss Shen appear there?" Fan Xian yawned and continued, "This could be northern Qi trying to mess with our minds, or at least weaken the trust the court has in Yan Bingyun."
"How could that be?"
Wang Qinian was puzzled. The imperial court is naturally aware of Lord Yan's methods. "Things can always get complicated," Fan Xian said expressionlessly. "If someone with ulterior motives wants to do something, this could be a loophole, and there's something else I don't understand. Old Wang, tell me, why is it that when we went to see Lord Yan, he was clearly able to return home, but I didn't see a trace of happiness on his face?" "Because the price the court paid to have him return home was too high." Wang Qinian had been in the Overwatch Council for a long time, and he was more familiar with the eccentric officials of the council than Fan Xian. He said respectfully, "If Lord Yan knew that the court would use Xiao En in exchange for him, perhaps he would have chosen to commit suicide when he was first arrested, instead of waiting until now." Fan Xian seemed to find it difficult to understand the state of mind of these Overwatch Council officials. He frowned and said, "Could it be an outstanding Overwatch Council official, really?" He deliberated for a long time before carefully asking, "Really is willing to sacrifice himself for the country?"
Yes.
Wang Qinian stole a glance at Fan Xian and found that his face was only a little confused. He then respectfully said, "I admire Lord Yan very much. But as an official of the Overwatch Council, or perhaps as a secret agent of the court, when you first entered the council, you should have been prepared to sacrifice yourself for the country. The secret agents of the council only believe in one thing. For this goal, any method, any sacrifice is permitted." "What goal?" "Everything for the kingdom of Qing." Wang Qinian's face showed a somewhat fanatical expression. Fan Xian's finger unconsciously wrote something on the table. He had seen Yan Bingyan for the first time today and found that he had been sitting in that chair the entire time, and his sitting posture was a little strange, like a javelin. Other than his buttocks, there was no other part of him that was touching the chair. It wasn't until he left that Fan Xian realized that Yan Bingyan's feet were chained to the chair. There could only be one explanation for Yan Bingyun's sitting posture. There was no part of Yan Bingyun's body that was unharmed. It was all rotten flesh, which was why he had chosen this posture. Everything for the kingdom of Qing? Fan Xian's frown deepened. So they're all a bunch of idealists. The kingdom of Qing had sent a letter through official channels to the diplomatic mission. Naturally, there were no secrets in the letter, only that the birthday of the Empress Dowager of Northern Qi was approaching, and the court had ordered the diplomatic mission to postpone their return to Qing. After this important matter was completed, they would return. This wasn't a big deal. The diplomatic exchanges between the two countries, and when it came to something like the Empress Dowager's birthday, they would have to join in the fun. Furthermore, being in Shangjing, Fan Xian still had some matters to attend to, so he was happy to stay a few more days. But thinking of his beautiful wife and weak sister at home, he couldn't help but feel a little worried. The Empress Dowager's birthday, and we represent the face of the court. This gift can't be too shabby. Deputy Lin Jing pondered. "Why don't we ask one of our subordinates to go for a stroll on Xiaoshui Street?" Hearing the words Xiaoshui Street, Fan Xian thought of the letter boss Sheng had handed him and shook his head. The waters of Shangjing were deep enough, and the eldest princess still wanted to remotely control the internal strife of a foreign country from Xinjiang. Fan Xian certainly didn't want to get involved in such muddy waters. "Then what should we give?" Lin Jing began to have a headache over the problem of giving gifts to the palace banquet. Fan Xian already had a plan. With a wave of his hand, he said, "When the time comes, I'll write a poem and mount it properly." This sounded arrogant, but his subordinates all nodded their heads. The immortal poet Fan Xian didn't write poetry, and this was something the whole world knew. If Fan Xian made an exception for the Northern Qi Empress Dowager's birthday, it would be a great honor. But Fan Xian's calligraphy really wasn't presentable. Wang Qinian began to come up with a bad idea. Master Yan's status in Northern Qi is that of the great scholar Yun. He is skilled in chess, the zither, calligraphy, and painting. His calligraphy master is Master Pan Ling. Last year in Northern Qi, a Chinese painting could be sold for 1,000 liang of silver. Master Fan will write a poem, and Master Yan will write a letter. With two of the most talented young men of the kingdom of Qing working together, wouldn't the Northern Qi Empress Dowager laugh her head off? Lin Jing and Lin Wen knew that Wang Qinian was Fan Xian's confidant, and thought that this was a good idea. Now that they knew who Master Yan was, they felt that it was a little strange, but for a moment they couldn't figure out what was so strange about it. Fan Xian laughed and scolded him. "Who is Master Yan? I'm afraid the people of Northern Qi want nothing more than to eat his flesh and drink his blood. And you're suggesting that he write a poem for the Empress Dowager as a birthday gift? Aren't you afraid that when the Empress Dowager opens the scroll, she'll die of anger and the palace will become a funeral?" Wang Qinian was embarrassed. Only now did he realize that his suggestion was indeed absurd. He laughed. "If we can anger the Northern Qi Empress Dowager to death, it'll be a good story for the council." Fan Xian didn't pay attention to the middle-aged man's dry joke. He sank into deep thought. It was clear that if Yan Bingyun returned to the kingdom of Qing safely, with the foundation he had built in northern Qi over the past 4 years and a year in prison, Yan Bingyun would immediately rise in the Overwatch Council. His father, Yan Ruohai, was the head of the 4th Bureau, and the 1st Bureau's position had always been vacant. Everyone in the council knew that Director Chen had left the position of head of the 1st Bureau for the imprisoned Yan Bingyun. And if nothing unexpected happened, Fan Xian would gradually begin to take over everything in the Overwatch Council after Chen Pingping died. And Fan Xian knew that that day might be far away, or it might be very, very near. If Fan Xian wanted to firmly control the Overwatch Council in his hands, then the 8 bureaus were people he had to control. This was Fan Xian's greatest weakness. Other than the 3rd and 8th bureaus, he basically had no trusted aides in the Overwatch Council. He had originally thought that on this trip north, he could win Yan Bingyun's friendship and thus gain the support of the 1st and 4th bureaus. Unexpectedly, upon seeing him for the first time, Fan Xian could clearly sense that Yan Bingyun seemed to have some faint hostility toward him. Why was this? Fortunately, Yan Bingyun didn't seem to want to hide this hostility, which made Fan Xian feel a little more at ease. "Master, it's time," Wang Qinian reminded him in a quiet voice. Fan Xian nodded and stood up to leave the courtyard. Behind him, the 2 brothers, Lin Jing and Lin Wen, looked at each other, unsure of where the envoy was going today. Outside the courtyard, Chong Ningho's family was waiting. Some people in the palace had already spoken, so the imperial guards responsible for the diplomatic mission's protection tacitly agreed to let those in embroidered clothing take over their duties. They guarded the carriage as it drove toward Taiping Alley, the busiest street in Shangjing, northern Qi. It was drizzling, and in the blink of an eye, the carriage's tracks were swallowed up. Fan Xian, the commissioner of the Overwatch Council of the Kingdom of Qing, was going to meet with Xin Zhong of the provost of the Brocade Guard of the Kingdom of Qi. A meeting between secret agents was always mysterious. Chapter 223. Raindrops hit the roof of the carriage with a dull thud. Fan Xian closed his eyes to rest. He didn't know how long they had been traveling, but he found that the carriage had finally stopped. Fan Xian opened the door of the carriage with one hand and smiled slightly. He stepped out into the rain, only to find that there was an umbrella over his head, shielding him from the wind and rain. Only the cold of spring in the alley around him seeped in through the umbrella. Wang Qinian, dressed in black, held the umbrella over Fan Xian's head. Behind him, the 7 tiger guards carried long knives on their backs, silently lined up on either side of Fan Xian. Fan Xian wore a dark-colored cloak with a plain-colored robe underneath. Hidden underneath was the nocturnal clothes he had prepared before leaving the capital. His plain clothes exuded a murderous aura. Paired with his handsome face, he looked incomparably spirited. "Commissioner Fan, this way, please." The brocade guard responsible for leading the way expressionlessly extended his hand and led them into a courtyard. The courtyard was in a side alley. Fan Xian tilted his head slightly and could faintly hear the bustle in front of him. He smiled and said, "Looks like it's the back courtyard of a brothel." The brocade guard's expression froze for a moment. Then he replied with a smile, "Commissioner, your hearing is amazing. This is the back courtyard of Panchalin. Master Shen likes to entertain guests here." Fan Xian knew of Panchalin. According to legend, it was the most exclusive place in northern Qi. The first founding emperor of northern Qi had been a frequent visitor here. He smiled and nodded. He stepped on the puddles of water on the stone slabs and walked into the back courtyard. The courtyard was filled with layers of bamboo and layers of fake mountains. Brocade guard spies could be seen everywhere. These people were clearly guards, and they did not deliberately hide themselves. Along the way, Wang Qinian held the umbrella, and the 7 tiger guards followed silently. With Fan Xian at the front, they walked coldly and confidently into the depths of the courtyard. Along the way, seeing this group of people from an enemy country in the south, the brocade guards could not help but be surprised. They were surprised at the other party's courage and surprised at the youth of the important figure in front of them. With a swish, Wang Qinian closed the umbrella and silently retreated behind Fan Xian. Fan Xian held his hands behind his back and narrowed his eyes at the courtyard. The room was quite large, with a large round table in the middle. There was a large empty space around it, and all sorts of exquisite decorations. The round table was wide enough to seat 15 to 16 people, but there were only 2 people sitting at the moment. One of them was dressed like a rich man. He wore a silk hat and a jade ring on his finger. After this person saw Fan Xian come in, 2 unusual cold lights began to appear in his extremely ordinary eyes. He looked directly at Fan Xian's face. A moment later, he opened his mouth and said, "Commissioner Fan? I've heard a lot about you, and now that I've seen you today, you're indeed extraordinary." Fan Xian did not immediately respond to this polite greeting. Instead, he thought about it in his heart. All along the way, the Northern Qi Brocade Guard had addressed him by his official title of Commissioner. It seemed that this conversation was between the Overwatch Council and the Brocade Guard, and not a diplomatic negotiation between the royal court. He raised his right hand, and with 2 fingers undid the buckle at his neck, and the thin cloak slid down his back. Wang Qinian was already behind him. Fan Xian sat on the other side of the large round table and looked at the rich man across from him. He noticed that the man's eyebrows were very thick, so thick that they looked like they had been drawn on. He couldn't help but smile. "Master Shen, you look so cold to the world. Why are you so polite to me?" This was the provost of the Northern Qi Brocade Guard, Master Shinzhong. Shinzhong controlled countless brocade guards in the north, and was one of the most powerful figures in the world. Fan Xian had not expected him to look so ordinary. If it weren't for the extremely detailed records of this man in the Overwatch Council's files, Fan Xian would not have been able to recognize him. "I'm not being polite." Provost Shin sighed. Looking at Fan Xian's delicate face, he couldn't help but shake his head. "Master Fan, you are famous throughout the world for your poetry. I, as an uncouth old man, admire you greatly. I didn't expect to suddenly receive news in the last 2 months that Fan Xian, the immortal poet, has become the commissioner of the Overwatch Council. This I really don't understand. What is old Mr. Chen thinking? How could someone like Master Fan live like rats in the sewers like us?" Fan Xian chuckled. "Master Shen, you are too modest. I have traveled thousands of miles to become an official for the sake of wealth. No matter what I do, first it is to benefit the court, and second, nothing more than to find a place for my family to live." These words were a bit blunt, and Shinzhong sighed in his heart. He couldn't help but look down on this colleague of his from the south. After all, he was a young man, and his words and actions were a bit crude. He really didn't know what Chen Pingping was thinking, and he didn't know why the terrifying Emperor of the South would agree to the Overwatch Council's seemingly absurd personnel arrangement. In truth, as the provost of the Northern Qi Brocade Guard, Shinzhong had always felt an indescribable admiration for his colleagues in the South. As for the crippled man in the wheelchair, he was even more respectful and fearful. He still couldn't understand how his counterparts in the south could obtain the Qing Emperor's complete trust, unlike him, who stood shakily in court and didn't know which day he would be thrown away like a pair of broken shoes by the people in the palace. Shinzhong immediately came to his senses. He knew why Fan Xian, as the head of the envoy, had taken the risk of meeting him through Changningho. There was a huge profit to be made in this transaction. Shinzhong couldn't help but be tempted, and the palace couldn't help but be tempted. When it comes to things like gold and silver, no one would complain about having too much. Shinzhong suddenly smiled. "It's just that I can't see how the provost can benefit from this." Fan Xian waved his hand, and Wang Qinian and the 7 tiger guards left. Shinzhong nodded, and the rest of the people in the hall also left. Fan Xian looked at the man sitting next to Shinzhong with some surprise. He was dressed luxuriously, but he didn't have the royal air that Fan Xian was familiar with. It seemed that he wasn't someone sent by the royal palace of Northern Qi to listen in. So, why did he have the right to continue sitting here? "This is Master Cui," Shinzhong introduced. Master Cui stood up and bowed to Fan Xian, but there was a hint of pride on his face. Fan Xian frowned. A man of the Qing kingdom? Xinzhong laughed heartily and said, I thought the two of you already knew each other. Commissioner Fan, this Master Cui is the second son of the Cui clan of the Qing kingdom. The Cui clan and the Fan clan have always been on par, and both are sons of noble families. Fan Xian frowned. Master Shen, what do you mean by this? A sinister look flashed through Xinzhong's eyes. Master Fan, didn't you want to talk business? In fact, I've been doing this business for many years, so I want to know if Master Fan has any more benefits for me. Fan Xian tilted his head slightly and looked at Master Cui, trying to read his face. Suddenly, he asked, Master Cui, did you come to this banquet of your own accord, or did your family elders ask you to come? How could I miss such a grand event? Master Cui didn't seem to be afraid of Fan Xian. Things had become very clear. This Master Cui was clearly representing the interests of the Cui clan, and behind the Cui clan was the eldest princess, who was far away in Xinyang. It wasn't that Fan Xian hadn't considered the possibility that the eldest princess had relied on smuggling to obtain so much profit from the palace treasury. But he hadn't expected that the provost of the brocade guard would pull the eldest princess's representative to the table. What made Fan Xian even angrier was that this rascal Cui actually dared to sit at the table and act as a bargaining chip for the other party. The eldest princess had a favor to ask of Fan Xian, so it was impossible for her to interfere in his affairs. It must have been this rascal Cui acting on his own. Fan Xian had taken the initiative to contact Xinzhong. On one hand, he wanted to build a connection, but on the other hand, he wanted to attack Xinyang's source of income. He hadn't expected the Northern Qi kingdom to play such a trick. What should have been a game of secret bidding had been brought out into the open. As if sensing his displeasure, Xinzhong smiled and said, Master Fan, there is no harm in being frank. We are all people who want to make a fortune. This Master Cui, and you are planning to do business in a way that overlaps, and I cannot eat both sides. Naturally, I would like to hear your opinion. Fan Xian regained his composure. He looked at Master Cui. I didn't expect Master Cui to have the guts to make such a big deal. How could I compare to Master Fan's guts? Master Cui smiled. Xinzhong saw that the situation was a little awkward. He smiled. Master Cui is also the son of a noble family. His family has several high-ranking officials in the southern court, but he is currently traveling. One day, he will enter the court as an official. You two should get to know each other. Hearing this, Fan Xian laughed coldly to himself. He looked at Xinzhong. Master Shen, perhaps you've forgotten who I am. I really don't care about noble families or whatever. Having said this, Fan Xian stood up. Without saying a word, he left the hall. Wang Qinian had already received him with an umbrella. 7 tiger guards gripped the hilts of their long swords in their hands. They escorted Fan Xian out of the courtyard. Along the way, none of the brocade guards dared to stop them. All they heard was the soft sound of a carriage outside the courtyard. Fan Xian had left so rudely. As if he hadn't expected Fan Xian to have such an intense reaction, Xinzhong stood rooted to the ground. He had been immersed in officialdom for decades and had seen all kinds of negotiations. But he had never encountered a situation like this. The way this young commissioner Fan did things was far beyond anyone's expectations. He turned his head and smiled warmly. Master Cui, this Master Fan is a man of character. Master Cui's face turned red and green. Fan Xian's words had greatly hurt his self-esteem. What noble families! How could Fan Xian say he didn't care about them? He thought angrily, what is the Fan family? He drank a cup of wine to drown his sorrows. In his heart, he felt that something was wrong. Xinzhong looked at him, not saying a word. Suddenly, Master Cui's hands began to tremble. He remembered Fan Xian's identity as an Overwatch Council member and that he was, after all, the son-in-law of the eldest princess. His face turned pale with fright. He looked at Xinzhong again, his eyes filled with hatred. He cursed. Master Shen, you tricked me into coming here. Do you want me to die? Chapter 224. The night rain fell on foreign soil, making a familiar pitter-patter. Fan Xian took a sip of tea and said to Wang Qinian, "Write a secret letter immediately. Have the council investigate the relationship between the Chui clan and Xinyang." Wang Qinian looked at him and said quietly, "We cannot touch the eldest princess." "Of course I know we cannot touch her." Fan Xian knew that the things that the eldest princess had done were actually all tacitly approved by the emperor. But today's unfriendly meeting with Xinzhong only strengthened a certain idea in Fan Xian's heart. "I just want to find out how much power Xinyang has in the court." "Yes." Wang Qinian agreed and continued, "Master Chui is still kneeling outside. Sir, do you think we should let him rise? After all, the Chui clan is a large clan in the capital, and there are several high-ranking officials in the court." Fan Xian's eyes were fixed on the intelligence report sent by the council. He ignored Wang Qinian's words. The group of angels were in Shangjing, and before Yan Bingyan returned, Fan Xian did not dare to use the intelligence network in northern Qi. So his source of intelligence had shrunk, which made him very vexed. After a while, he seemed to hear what Wang Qinian said. He said quietly, "Let him kneel. As a citizen of Qing, he is being used by northern Qi. I will teach him a lesson on behalf of my mother-in-law." The rain gradually lessened, dripping down from the eaves. This courtyard was an old building, so the places where the rain fell had sunk slightly. Fan Xian put on a robe and walked out of the room. He looked at Chui kneeling in front of the stone steps and did not speak for a long time. The other members of the diplomatic mission had long since avoided this small courtyard, so it was especially quiet. "You should know very well what you should do if your family still wants to do business in the north." Fan Xian looked coldly at the soaked Chui. "I will spare your life for today. Write a letter to Xinyang. As for how the eldest princess will punish you, that is your business. But while I am in Shangjing, I do not wish to see you sitting with those people from northern Qi." Chui kowtowed heavily, burying his upper body in the puddles on the ground. He trembled and did not dare to speak. "Let me remind you again, I am the commissioner of the Overwatch Council. Even if the eldest princess is protecting you, if I really want the Chui family to suffer, I have many ways to do so." Fan Xian said, "Although this is a very vulgar threat, I think for a stupid person like you, if you don't make it clear, you'll still be used as a knife by the northern Qi people next time. That would not be good." Master Chui was still kneeling miserably. At the time, he had woken up in the rear courtyard of Panshan. Only then did he realize how big a mistake he had made. Putting aside Fan Xian's identity as the Overwatch Council that everyone feared, he was the son-in-law of the eldest princess. In Fan Xian's eyes, Master Chui was at most an ant. Today, he had acted on his own to see what the Overwatch Council wanted to do with northern Qi. Originally, he had considered the issue from the eldest princess's point of view. But if Fan Xian really wanted to deal with him, he feared that the eldest princess would not bother to protect him. Given Fan Xian's current power and influence, aristocratic families were really not worth his attention. Let's put it plainly. Fan Xian looked at him. "You work for the eldest princess. Naturally, I will not make things difficult for you. But right now, I want to do something, so I hope you can see the situation clearly." "Yes, Master Fan," Master Chui said in a trembling voice. "I have made a mistake. We are all officials of the Kingdom of Qing. No matter what happens in the court, once we leave the country, we must remember that you and I are both citizens of Qing. Do not let outsiders laugh at us. This is what angers me the most." After this little interlude, Xinyang carefully maintained their respect for the diplomatic mission, and northern Qi finally felt Fan Xian's power. More accurately, they felt the power of the Overwatch Council of the Southern Court. Xinzhong had always made deals with Xinyang, so when Fan Xian proposed this deal through Changningho, he did not think much of it. But looking at the current situation, it seemed that the rumors were true. If Fan Xian really did control the palace treasury in the coming year, the eldest princess would lose her power and Xinzhong's discipline commission would offend Fan Xian, then a large source of income would be cut off. The northern Qi palace also knew of this matter. The Empress Dowager fiercely questioned Xinzhong. Xinzhong was full of anxiety. Who would have thought that Commissioner Fan would not even give him a chance to bargain? And the news that Master Chui had knelt at the diplomatic mission that night had also reached the ears of the brocade guard. Xinzhong knew that he had to look at Fan Xian in a new light. But no one could have guessed that Fan Xian actually did not want to discuss the deal. A few times, Xinzhong sent people to invite Fan Xian, but Fan Xian coldly pushed them away as if he did not want to talk. "Sir, what exactly do you want?" Wang Qinian was Fan Xian's most trusted confidant. There were many things that even the Overwatch Council did not know, but Wang Qinian was well aware of them. He knew that Fan Xian had secretly done many things to deal with the eldest princess of Xinyang, but the eldest princess did not seem to have noticed. But now, Fan Xian looked as if he wanted to reconcile with the eldest princess. This puzzled Wang Qinian. "I want everyone to not know what I want to do." Fan Xian straightened his clothes. Without turning his head, he said quietly, "The eldest princess has a favor to ask of me. Naturally, I want to take advantage of this opportunity to gain some benefits." Wang Qinian still did not understand, and Fan Xian did not explain further. That afternoon, a carriage entered the diplomatic mission's encampment through a corner gate. The carriage looked very shabby and ordinary. Whether it was the carriage's decoration or the coachman's appearance, there was nothing out of the ordinary about it. But everyone in charge of the diplomatic mission's security could clearly feel the tension inside. Outside, the shadows of the Northern Qi brocade guard could be seen everywhere. Fan Xian looked at the carriage and said something that seemed completely unrelated to the current situation. "It seems Sea Lily has also arrived in Shangjing." A young man in a white robe pushed open the carriage door and slowly moved forward. He stood there, looking at the sky above his head. He narrowed his eyes slightly and then lowered his head to look at the people in the courtyard who were looking at him. He could easily sense the smell of the courtyard from these people, and he could not help but smile faintly. Fan Xian walked forward and condescendingly took Yan Bingyun's uninjured right hand. He carefully helped him out of the carriage and said quietly, "Welcome home." For the people of Qing, the diplomatic mission's location was like their homeland. Yan Bingyun had been imprisoned for a year and had long since prepared to die. Although he still could not accept the agreement to trade Xiao An for himself, now that he had set foot on the diplomatic mission's grounds and heard Fan Xian's words of welcome home, he could not help but feel moved. There were no civil officials from the office of the Grand Herald in the courtyard. Aside from the 7 Tiger Guards, everyone else was an official of the Overwatch Council hidden within the diplomatic mission. They all looked at this young man, who had difficulty walking, and bowed in unison. "Greetings, Master Yan." Their voices were not impassioned, nor were they loud, but their sincerity could be felt. Yan Bingyun smiled and said nothing. He only said quietly, "I am very surprised to be able to come out alive." Fan Xian held his hand and laughed. "I am also surprised that your fingernails were not completely pulled out." These 2 future deputy heads of the Overwatch Council spoke very softly, and only they could hear each other. Yan Bingyun returned to the diplomatic mission. His mission to Northern Qi was half complete. Fan Xian felt reassured. He said a few words to Wang Qinian, then helped Yan Bingyun into the inner chamber. "Take off your clothes." I didn't hold back. It was clear that Yan Bingyun would not misunderstand anything. He slowly tore off his white clothes, revealing his well-proportioned naked body. Fan Xian raised his eyebrows. He thought of how he had felt when he had changed clothes in the capital's 3rd bureau. He found that Yan Bingyun was indeed much calmer than he was. He took out a box of medicine from a box and used his fingers to pick out some, then began to evenly apply it to Yan Bingyun's body. Wherever his fingers passed, the wounds rose and fell. The horror of the wounds was indescribable. "I always thought you were just a lucky man," Yan Bingyun said coldly. Yan Bingyun said coldly, "But for Commissioner Fan to be able to remain so calm after seeing my wounds, it seems that you are much stronger than I thought." Fan Xian's fingers stopped at the left side of Yan Bingyun's chest. The bones there had clearly been reattached after they had been broken. There was a large bulge, and on the outside was light red new skin. It looked very ugly. "That's because you don't understand how I grew up." I thought I understood it very well. Yan Bingyan looked into his eyes coldly. Master Fan, I understand your life from the time you were born to the age of 12. Fan Xian tilted his head slightly and looked at him. He said nothing. Yan Bingyan sank into silence as well. It seemed he did not want to continue this topic. After a while, he said, "Thank you, Master, for treating my wounds. But I think I should be better at making medicine than you are. In a moment, please allow me to write down a prescription and have the diplomatic mission help me get a few doses of medicine." Fan Xian ignored him. He continued to apply the medicine, complementing it with the healing methods he had learned since childhood. "Eat him." Fan Xian unceremoniously stuffed a pill into Yan Bingyan's mouth. He said coldly, "When it comes to treating wounds and detoxifying poisons, there is no one in this world who dares to clamor in front of me." Chapter 225. Who's Fei Ti? Who else in the council is named Fei? Sir, are you talking about old Fei? I'm talking about that old freak. Fan Xian had finished everything. He called for someone to bring in a basin of warm water. He carefully washed his hands and pulled off a piece of fur to dry them. Then he said to Yan Bingyun, "You've been tortured for too long. Your heart has been injured, and your martial arts training has been greatly damaged." After saying this, he carefully observed Yan Bingyun's expression. He found that Yan Bingyun's face was calm, as if he hadn't heard anything. He couldn't help but sigh in admiration. He had made up his mind to take this seemingly cold, but actually extremely arrogant young man into his fold. "After you return home, take good care of yourself. It's not like you can't be cured. If your nails are pulled out, they'll grow back. If your bones are dislocated, I'll have the bald man from the 7th Bureau break them again. I'll treat you again. I can't let you become an old cripple like Qin Pingping." Fan Xian joked, but Yan Bingyun felt a bit strange. The entire Overwatch Council had spies all over the world, and not a single one of them dared to call Director Chen an old cripple in front of others. Yan Bingyun slowly narrowed his eyes, as if trying to see the truth behind this matter. For example, why was Fan Xian already the commissioner of the Overwatch Council at such a young age? Right at this moment, a burning sensation rose from his chest and abdomen. Even though his temperament was incomparably firm, he was still shaken by this sudden pain, and the corner of his eyebrows twitched a little. "It's nothing. It's just a method to force out the poison. Because I don't know what poison is in your body, the medicine I used was a bit too strong. But with me watching, you won't die." Fan Xian didn't care and helped him put on his clothes. Sweat beaded on Yan Bingyun's forehead. It was obvious he was in great pain. In a low voice, he said, "Damn, this is worse than being poisoned. What kind of antidote is this?" Fan Xian was overjoyed. He clapped his hands and praised, "Brother Yan, you're finally willing to curse. That's right. Who are you always putting on that cold face for? You can act cool in front of the Northern Qi brocade guards, but don't do it in front of me. I've seen it since I was little." What he had seen since he was little was naturally that cool Uncle Zhu. "Who did you learn this antidote from?" "I don't trust you," Yan Bingyun asked coldly as he felt the area of his body that was smeared with ointment start to burn. "As I said earlier." Fan Xian looked at him with a smile. A strange light flashed in Yan Bingyun's eyes. Forgetting all the pain inside and outside of his body, he hissed, "You are Fei Jie's disciple?" His voice was full of surprise. "Fei Jie doesn't have a disciple like you. You even boasted that you knew everything about me before I was 12. Fan Xian began to tidy up the bottles by the bed. "You don't even know who my teacher is," he said mockingly. Yan Bingyun looked at him and did not speak for a long time. Fan Xian looked back at him innocently. He rested his chin on his hand and looked at the worms all over Master Yan's body. "I say, Brother Yan," he said quietly, "why do I feel like you look at me with anger?" This was a thorn in Fan Xian's heart. Since he wanted to subdue Yan Bingyun, he had to know why he had such strong feelings of resistance toward him. Otherwise, his days in the future would be difficult. There was a long silence. Yan Bingyun still did not seem to want to talk about this topic. But for some reason, as the burning pain inside and outside of his body gradually faded, the head of the Overwatch Council in the north began to feel dizzy. Looking at Fan Xian's beautiful face, he felt an inexplicable hatred. He thought of the exciting life he had led in the Northern Qi court these years, and his words seemed to escape from his dry lips. Commissioner, I don't know if you still remember that there was a murder case in Danzhou 5 years ago. It has never been solved. Fan Xian's hand, which was in the middle of closing the box, did not stop. He was slightly surprised. Of course he remembered that murder case. It was the first time Fan Xian had killed someone in his 2 lives. Even now, the cold chestnut that had burst out of the assassin's throat seemed to be stimulating Fan Xian's palm. I know what you're talking about. Fan Xian frowned. What does this have to do with you and me? Yan Bingyun smiled strangely. That assassin was under the jurisdiction of the 4th Bureau. It was because of this that I was chased north to be a rat. So you hate me? Fan Xian sank into silence. After a while, he suddenly laughed with extreme pleasure. I thought you should thank me. Why? Yan Bingyun's dizziness faded a little. After a moment of surprise, he returned to his cold demeanor. Fan Xian stared into his eyes and enunciated each word clearly. Because I can see that you were born to be a spy. You like this kind of life. I think these 4 years of hiding in Northern Qi, nervous and uneasy day and night, have been a very exciting and fulfilling life for you. Yan Bingyun said, If you like it, sir, you can try it. Fan Xian smiled and picked up the medicine box. Like a doctor, he walked out of the side room and closed the door behind him. He gave a barely noticeable shrug and scraped the drug out of his fingernails into the corner of the box. He warned himself in his heart that he would only use the drug on one of his own people once. There would be no next time. Yan Bingyun was indeed powerful. Under the effects of chloroform, he was able to wake up immediately. If he knew that Fan Xian had used this trick, it would be difficult for the 2 of them to get along. Hearing this story from Yan Bingyun made Fan Xian feel touched. At the same time, he knew the real reason why Yan Bingyun disliked him. Fan Xian felt very comforted. He did not think that he and Yan Bingyun had such a strange history. 5 years ago, because of the attempted murder in Danzhou, Yan Bingyun was chased to the north and became the head spy of the Overwatch Council in Northern Qi. 5 years later, it was Fan Xian who had come to bring him back. Thinking of this, Fan Xian couldn't help but smile. In this world, who knew when it would come back to haunt him? Sir, Boss Sheng is here with wine, a subordinate reported. Fan Xian waved his hand. Take it. I don't want to see him. The subordinate acknowledged and went out. Fan Xian frowned. He had just lectured Master Cui, and now there was a letter from Xinyang. That eldest princess was really hot on his heels. As he was thinking this, Wang Qinian came in from outside. He held a letter in his hand. A letter from Sheng Huairan. Fan Xian tore open the seal and read it carefully. A look of worry appeared on his face. What are these people playing at? He raised his eyebrows and went into the backyard. Yan Bingyun was very alert. When Fan Xian opened the door, his hand had already touched the knife at his side. Relax a little. Fan Xian looked at him, whose eyes were still closed. No one will try to assassinate you here. Yan Bingyun slowly opened his eyes and looked at Fan Xian's face. A cold look flashed through his eyes. What medicine did you give me? Why do I feel dizzy? I used some medicine to calm the mind, Fan Xian explained calmly. Fan Xian calmly explained, Your spirit has been greatly depleted. If you want to recover as soon as possible, then you need a good night's sleep. I just didn't expect that your body's muscles would be able to resist the medicine. It's not very useful. What a pity. These light words covered up the earlier matter of the knockout drug. Fan Xian's delicate and untainted face was indeed the best disguise for crafty plots and conspiracies. Yan Bingyun knew that Fan Xian had entered the room because he had something to ask. His gaze fell on Fan Xian's hand. He frowned. Sir Fan, what is it? Fan Xian shook the letter in his hand and smiled. A letter from the eldest princess. Yan Bingyun was a little surprised, but he didn't show it on his face. What does this have to do with me? Before you return to the capital, you're still the commander of the Overwatch Council's spies in Northern Qi. Fan Xian smiled. So when the court wants to do something, I have to ask for your opinion. Please speak, sir. Yan Bingyun didn't change his expression. After Fan Xian had explained the contents of the 2 consecutive letters from Xinjiang, Yan Bingyun furrowed his brows. There were a few strands of silver between his brows. He appeared weak. In a quiet voice, he asked, "Why does the eldest princess care about these things?" "I only came to ask for your opinion. Should the council intervene in this matter?" Fan Xian said. Yan Bingyun shook his head. "The council wants Xiao En dead, but the eldest princess wants us to cooperate with Shang Shanhu to rescue Xiao En. These are 2 opposing goals. How can we cooperate?" Fan Xian sat down and looked at Yan Bingyun's cold face. "Let's not discuss this for now. I need to know from your mouth what the current situation in northern Qi is like." Yan Bingyun looked at him and held up 3 fingers. 3 sides. One side is the Empress Dowager, one side is the Emperor, and one side is Shang Shanhu. But since Shang Shanhu has been moved back to Shangjing, his power has been greatly damaged. He must choose between the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. It was a simple and crude statement, but it was a confident judgment. Fan Xian silently signaled for him to continue. Yan Bingyun continued. "According to what you say, if Xiao En is Shang Shanhu's adoptive father and imperial advisor Ku, he wants Xiao En dead, then in the end, Shang Shanhu will definitely side with the Emperor."
Why?
"Because the Empress Dowager will certainly listen to Ku He." Fan Xian unconsciously raised his eyebrows. The Empress Dowager is indeed quite young, but does imperial advisor Ku he still have such thoughts? Yan Bingyun was stunned. It took him a moment to realize that this young man, who was beautiful on the outside but extremely wretched on the inside, had misunderstood his meaning. He looked at Fan Xian with disdain. "Things are not what you think." Chapter 226. Through Yan Bingyun's narration, Fan Xian knew what had happened back then. After the kingdom of Qing's 3 northern expeditions, the Zhan family took advantage of the situation and established the kingdom of Qi. However, the founding emperor had unfortunately died 12 years ago, leaving behind only the Empress Dowager and the emperor, who had only been a few years old at the time, in the empty palace. Although the kingdom of Qing had stopped moving north, the ruthless Qin Pingping would not let go of this opportunity. He secretly supported and instigated some of the nobles of the previous dynasty and the Zhan family in Shangjing. In the end, it became a situation to force the emperor to abdicate. Seeing that the Empress Dowager and the emperor were about to be dragged out of the palace by the rebels, Ku He moved into the palace as a friend of Commander Zhan Qingfeng. At that time, 3,000 soldiers and horses surrounded the palace. Ku He sat in front of the great hall. Behind him were the pitiful mother and son, and a large group of trembling eunuchs and serving girls, holding candles and brooms. Faced with countless spears and arrows, Ku He sat alone in front of the great hall. No one dared to make a move. Then, the Empress Dowager's brother, Chong Ningho, crawled out of a sewer hole in the corner of the palace. He secretly contacted Xinzhong of the Brocade Guard and gathered a group of forces loyal to the royal family to return to the palace. Only then did they stabilize the situation in Shangjing in northern Qi. After the incident, Ku He did not pursue the matter, and the Empress Dowager maintained her silence. Although the nobles who tried to force the emperor to abdicate were fine at the time, they did not meet a good end in the future. So, no matter how one looked at it, the reason the Empress Dowager was able to sit safely in the palace was because of Ku He's reputation and unfathomable power. "Ku He is so cool," Fan Xian said, slapping his leg in admiration. "One man blocking 1,000 men. Even if there were millions of them, he would still go forward. So strong, so strong." Yan Bingyun looked at him. He felt that Ku He's words were a bit vulgar and not very respectful to the 4 great grandmasters. As one of the 4 great grandmasters, Ku He is aloof from the world. But if he shows his stance, no matter who it is, they have to be cautious. Fan Xian shook his head. "Those idiots who tried to force the emperor to abdicate, I don't believe that Ku He could do anything to them." At the time, Ku He swore a blood oath. If anyone dared to sit on that dragon chair, he would kill that person. Yan Bingyun suddenly felt that the commissioner in the council was somewhat childish. Given Ku He's terrifying power in the north, of course, he can kill whoever he wants. If you can't even keep your life, your head will be separated from your body the moment you sit on the throne. Who would be willing to be an emperor like that? Great Grandmaster? Fan Xian frowned. For the first time, he felt that this kind of existence, which was beyond the scope of mortals, was indeed a very troublesome matter. What? Master Fan is young and promising, yet you don't even care about a Grandmaster? Yan Bingyun looked at him coldly. Fan Xian smiled and didn't say anything. He had only met one of the 4 great Grandmasters, Yi Luyun. At the time, he only felt that his singing was pleasant. As for Uncle Wu Zhu, who was nameless but was actually on the same level as the 4 great Grandmasters, Fan Xian had grown up with him, so naturally, he couldn't feel excited. Let's continue talking about Shangjing. Fan Xian raised his hand. If the Empress Dowager listens to Ku He, and Ku He wants Xiao and dead, Yan Bingyun interrupted. Master, why are you so sure that Ku He wants Xiao and dead? I have my sources of information. Fan Xian smiled. He didn't say anything about hiding, nor did he say anything about the secret of the temple. He continued. Then Shang Shanhu will inevitably fall to the Emperor's side. Only by gathering all the power of the Emperor's party can we save Xiao An's old life. Master Yan, do you think we can gain something from this? Yan Bingyun shook his head. Suddenly, he thought of something. He smiled. Actually, when it comes to power, Northern Qi has never been weak. In these 4 years, I don't know how much I've seen, but I believe that compared to the kingdom of Qing, Northern Qi will never be able to win. Fan Xian didn't know why he had suddenly come to this conclusion. He was a little confused. Yan Bingyun laughed with great satisfaction. Just look at how the court will send Xiao and back to Northern Qi. In the past year, the balance and peace that the Empress Dowager and the Emperor have struggled to maintain will be broken. I truly admire the person in the court who planned this. The person who planned Xiao An's return was the eldest princess. Fan Xian's eyes were calm, but he was laughing coldly in his heart. There is nothing to admire. You have to know that this deal came at the cost of you. What do you mean? Yan Bingyun frowned. Fan Xian said, it was the eldest princess who sold you to the court of Northern Qi. Then, she arranged with Shang Shanhu to exchange Xiao An for Northern Qi. Even if there is some disturbance in the court of Northern Qi because of Xiao An, do you really think it will cause any big waves? You are nothing more than a pawn being manipulated by nobles. A pawn should have the self-awareness of a pawn. For someone like you to admire the hand that is holding your head, I really don't understand. These words were a little harsh. Fan Xian did it on purpose. He wanted to plant a seed of hatred in Yan Bingyun's heart for the eldest princess. Unexpectedly, Yan Bingyun's face was calm, as if he hadn't heard. Instead, he continued to plan. We cannot interfere in this matter. Xiao An's life and death have moved even Ku He. The diplomatic mission is in a foreign country, after all. It is impossible for us to interfere, and there is no need for us to interfere. I agree with your view. Fan Xian looked at him. But there is one more thing that I need your opinion on. Fan Xian told Yan Bingyun about what had happened to Cui a few days ago. Yan Bingyun's expression didn't change. What does Sir want to do? Fan Xian was silent for a while. But since he had already begun, he naturally continued. According to the council's wishes, we will gradually reduce the benefits that Xinjiang has gained from the north. The council's wishes? Yan Bingyun looked into Fan Xian's eyes. I hear that the commissioner may be in charge of the palace treasury next year. Fan Xian smiled as if he hadn't heard him. Sir Yan, you have been imprisoned for half a year, but you are still very well informed. After a long silence, Yan Bingyun suddenly said, Why are you telling me these things? Because you are most familiar with the routes in the north. If there comes a day when we need to pull in the net, then from now on, I must begin to keep a close eye. Without Sir Yan, I have no power in the north. Yan Bingyun calmly said, Sir Fan, you think very highly of me. I have never thought of you as a simple patient, Fan Xian said calmly. I believe that if Sir Yen had the desire, you would still be able to call the wind and summon the rain in the north. Why should I help you? Because I am your superior. Fan Xian's expression gradually grew cold. I am not asking for your help. I am asking for your cooperation. Yen Bingyun didn't buy it. He laughed coldly. When the commissioner truly takes over the Overwatch Council, it won't be too late for us to talk about this then. Fan Xian laughed and waved his hand. I knew that playing this game wouldn't work. He paused for a moment. The logic is simple. The eldest princess is our common enemy. Not only do I need you, but I believe that you need me as well. Yen Bingyun didn't think much of it. He calmly nodded. If that's the case, then I must make it clear. Your plan has been completely wrong from the beginning. Why do you say that? If you want to gradually reduce the eldest princess's profits from smuggling, you shouldn't have gone to Xinzhong. Xinzhong is the provost of the Discipline Commission of the Brocade Guard. If I didn't go to him, who would I go to? Yen Bingyun looked him in the eye. Xinzhong, Chong Ningho, these are all trusted aides of the Empress Dowager. They have been making deals with the eldest princess for many years. If you want to start anew, why not go to the young emperor? Fan Xian sighed. Because I can't see through the emperor's mind. The emperor of Northern Qi is a very pure person, a person who gets excited easily. Yen Bingyun raised a finger. A pure radical needs money. Fan Xian looked at him. After a moment he said, I trust you. At present, I am worthy of your trust, said Yen Bingyun. Fan Xian let out a sigh of relief. He patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry. Although the world is theirs now, it is still ours. Having said that, he left the room, leaving Yen Bingyun behind to reflect on those strange words. For the next 3 days, the diplomatic mission was still dealing with diplomatic matters with Northern Qi. Fan Xian and Yen Bingyun were secretly plotting in the room. Gradually, Yen Bingyun no longer hid anything. He analyzed the information he had, and very clearly established a guiding ideology for Fan Xian's future actions. Action was better than inaction. He needed to use delaying tactics in Xinjiang, and so did the Empress Dowager. Only the palace needed to be contacted. Fan Xian had once wondered if he should pay a visit to General Shang Shanhu, but Yen Bingyun had coldly stopped him. Yen Bingyun felt that there was no need to do these things. If the other party needed it, they would naturally come to him. Fan Xian's actions after entering Shangjing were, in Yen Bingyun's professional eyes, a complete mess. Fan Xian silently accepted the lesson. He knew that in these matters, he was not as good as Yen Bingyun. In addition to chatting, they also talked about reorganizing the spy network in the north. But Yen Bingyun clearly did not trust Fan Xian's abilities, so he never relented. One day, after eating, Fan Xian suddenly said, That Lady Shun is very capable. She actually knew that you were hiding in the diplomatic mission and came to you again. Yen Bingyun's face was as cold as ice, and he was as heartless as a flowing cloud. He said lightly, Inform Xinzhong. He will take care of his daughter's matter. Fan Xian glanced at him. He truly did not understand how this young official had honed such a cold and heartless will. Chapter 227. The diplomatic mission of the Kingdom of Qing had quietened down, and now it was the turn of the other powers to be anxious. Shopkeeper Sheng Often came to deliver wine, and humbly conveyed the greetings of Xinjiang. Xinzhong had also invited Fan Xian a few times, but Fan Xian found an excellent excuse to decline. Xinzhong had no way of getting angry. On the contrary, Chong Ningho felt his heart ache at the loss of a fat piece of meat that had been at the tip of his tongue. Perhaps there was some agreement between the eldest princess and Shang Shanhu, but Xinjiang did not have a deep foundation in Northern Qi. They still needed the help of the Overwatch Council. After Fan Xian's persuasion, Yen Bingyun finally agreed to his plan. He was prepared to use the network he had been building over the past 4 years. The news from the south seemed to show that the Qing court was as stable as Mount Tai, without a single ripple. However, the Overwatch Council's report mentioned that there had recently been a few strange murders on Shandong Road. Although the murders had killed ordinary people, their methods were extremely cruel. This was a case of the Ministry of Justice, but it had never been solved, so the Fourth Bureau of the Overwatch Council had taken over. Fan Xian did not pay much attention to this murder case, and Yan Bingyun did not pay attention either. After all, the matter in Shangjing was enough of a headache, and the two of them were planning something sinister. Fan Xian's reason for declining all the invitations was very good. For the past 2 days, he had often been chatting with a village girl. Given her status, neither Xinzhong nor Chang Ningho had the guts to steal guests from her. In a quiet alley in Shangjing, a man and a woman were strolling and chatting. Their words floated lightly, disturbing the butterflies that were nesting in the flowers. Nature is heaven and earth, and man is heaven and earth. The so-called unity of heaven and man means that human affairs must follow the natural path of heaven and earth. Only then can the two be harmonious. Harmony is only a facade. What do you think is the unity of heaven and man and the connection between heaven and man? Oh, I'm not sure about that. I just think that man follows the earth follows the heavens, heaven follows the Tao, and the Tao follows nature. Only then can there be harmony. Or harmony. Harmony is the highest. Master Fan, what you have said today is completely unconventional. I am truly impressed. Although she said she admired him, Haiding still put her hands in her pockets and dragged her feet. Her expression was serene as she walked on the street like a lazy woman. There was not a trace of admiration on her face. Fan Xian rubbed his nose in self-mockery. Just like that day in the palace, he imitated Haitong's sweeping footwork. Fortunately, this street was relatively quiet. Otherwise, if the two of them were to walk like this, they would probably be laughed to death by bystanders. Seeming to guess what he was thinking, Haiding said, "I just feel comfortable walking like this. As for what other people think, I really don't care." Fan Xian thought about it for a moment and realized that it was quite true. People loved ease and hated work. Walking like this was indeed more comfortable than walking with one's head held high. The problem was, if one was really lazy, why not lie down in bed? As he thought this, his mouth naturally said, "I still feel that lying on the bed is more comfortable. If Miss Haidang is willing, we can lie on the bed and talk about literature, talk about life." Haidang glanced at him. Fan Xian smiled a little embarrassedly and did not explain anything. He really did not have many romantic thoughts about Haidang, but for some reason, chatting with her always made him feel very relaxed. After his rebirth, Fan Xian had always wanted to experience many interesting things and meet many interesting people. This visit to Northern Qi was largely to satisfy this spiritual need of his. Although there had been assassination plots along the way, and things had not been very interesting, Fan Xian had gotten to know 2 interesting people, Yan Bingyun and Haidang. Fan Xian felt that it had been worth it. "I heard that Master Fan met with Master Xinzhong a few days ago?" Haidang asked softly, reaching out to pull out the green branches hanging down from the street. It was already summer, but it had been raining heavily a few days ago, so there was no heat. The trees and flowers were still in the spirit of spring. Fan Xian nodded. "We parted on bad terms." He knew that although he was above the court, he could see that the power of his faction was still biased towards the Empress Dowager, so he guessed why Haidang had asked this. "Parted on bad terms?" Haidang smiled, her face gentle. "I am just curious. Master Fan, why did you hurriedly throw out that proposal? Were you not afraid that it would affect your reputation as an official if it got back to the south?" Fan Xian's heart trembled, but his face showed no expression. "I do not understand what you are talking about." Haidang said, "The Empress Dowager was very tempted by your proposal." Fan Xian's face darkened slightly. "Miss Haidang, you should know that these days I have been in seclusion, refusing guests. The reason why I came out to accompany you when you spoke was because I felt that although you had acted against me at Wudu, you are, after all, an unworldly master. You would not talk about these petty matters of the world. Miss Haidang, you have disappointed me. If I did not say these things, I am afraid you would be even more disappointed, Master Fan." Haitong's mind was clear, and she would not be fooled by Fan Xian's flowery words. "The Empress Dowager invites you into the palace." Fan Xian chuckled and cupped his hands in salute. Thank you for your trouble, Miss Haidang. Earlier, Master Fan, you said that sincerity is the way of heaven, and sincerity is the way of man. Haitong's bright, jewel-like eyes looked at Fan Xian in a trance. Since you know the way, why not? Isn't it easier to deal with people with sincerity? Fan Xian took a deep breath and slowly circulated the strange, tyrannical Jinqi in his body, resisting the pressure coming from Haitang. He smiled. Dealing with people with sincerity can be divided into big and small. Sincerity to people is a small way, and sincerity to the world is a great way. Miss Haidang, if you treat people with sincerity, why don't you tell me what secret Shao, and has that even an unworldly master like your master is tempted? Sincerity to the world. Haitong's lips curled up slightly. My master is sincerity to the world, so I cannot say much. But the secret in Shao An's heart has kept him alive for 20 years. If that secret were to spread among the common people, I fear that the world would be in chaos for 20 years. Fan Xian was startled. He knew something that no one else knew. Based on what Haidang had said, could it be that there was some danger in the temple? The two of them returned to the path of idle conversation, and it was nothing more than a discussion of philosophy and theology. In any case, Fan Xian had a foundation in the history of Chinese philosophy from his previous life. He randomly picked out a few of Dong, Lu, and Wang's theories, and Haidang was greatly surprised. But many years later, Haidang slowly reflected on it and began to organize the theories of the great scholar Fan. Only then did she realize that the young man had said nothing. For some reason, in the late spring and early summer of northern Shangjing, the rain was so plentiful. Before, the warm spring sun had shone brightly, but now a chilly breeze blew, and raindrops fell through the branches above their heads. With a crash, Fan Xian opened the cloth umbrella at his side and held it over Haitong's head. Under normal circumstances, given Fan Xian's status, when he went out in the rain, his subordinates would hold the umbrella. But right now, it was just the two of them, and purely in terms of status, it was only right and proper for him to hold the umbrella for Haidang. The rain gradually soaked the street. Fan Xian looked calmly at the people on the street hiding from the rain, but in reality, he was carefully watching Haitong's steps. At this time, the feet of the two of them were covered in water. Fan Xian had long since stopped using the country girl's walk, intending to see how Haitang would walk. Haitang continued to walk. Fan Xian shrugged his shoulders helplessly. Only now did he realize that although Haitang's feet were dragging on the water, there seemed to be some kind of invisible power under her shoes, supporting her whole body. The soles of her shoes were not touching the water at all. This kind of skill, Fan Xian thought, was not at a level he could reach. He couldn't help but laugh at himself. Haitang floats on water. Haitang ignored him and continued to walk. Fan Xian sighed. I don't believe that you can walk comfortably like that. I don't like that man called Yan Bingyun, Haitang suddenly said. I think that Miss Haitang has always lived deep in the mountain palace. You shouldn't have had any contact with the great scholar of the Qing kingdom. Using deceiving women to obtain his own benefits, Haitang is quite shameless. We are officials, not ordinary people, Fan Xian said on Yan Bingyun's behalf. He didn't want Yan Bingyun to be remembered by a 9th-level master for the rest of his life. For the good of the kingdom of Qing, there are some things that we must do. Haitang said, ugliness is ugliness. Don't use being an official as a cover. Fan Xian smiled. Although being emotionless may not necessarily be a true hero, if one's heart is too soft, how can one survive in this chaotic world? Master Fan, do you believe that today's world is chaotic? The minds of the people are confused. Master Fan, do you believe that only chaotic times can produce heroes? I do not seek to establish myself as a hero. I only seek to be a man with a clear conscience. The two of them talked and stopped. They had already reached the outskirts of a small temple. At that moment, the rain had coincidentally stopped. This place was far away on the outskirts of the capital. It was very quiet, without a trace of human presence. A leaf fell on the stone steps in front of the temple. The temple door was slowly pushed open. Fan Xian looked at the woman sitting by the incense table in the temple. After a moment of absent-mindedness, he bowed. Miss C, long time no see. The corners of Haitong's lips curled up. Master Fan, you want to be a man. I did not expect that. As I expected, you are a man who has tender, protective feelings for the fairer sex. With a swish, Fan Xian gathered up his wet umbrella and looked at Sea Lily, who had risen to greet him. He smiled. Being emotionless may not necessarily be a true hero. How can a man who has tender feelings for the fairer sex not be a man? Chapter 228. A heartless man is not necessarily a true hero. How can a compassionate son not be a true man? Haidang repeated slowly. Her face returned to her usual smile, and she led Fan Xian through the wooden door of the little temple. Master Fan. Sea Lily curtsied. Fan Xian, with a warm and distant smile, cupped his hands in greeting. When did you enter Shangjing, Miss C? Thanks to your good fortune, I entered the capital 3 days ago. I had a safe journey. Thank you for your concern. Sea Lily slowly lowered her eyelids. She was still wearing the light green robe she had worn during the journey. The weather was hot, and she was not afraid of catching a cold. Fan Xian quietly said a few more words to her. Haiding watched calmly from the side, but there was a glimmer of a smile in her eyes. How could the unfamiliar expressions on their faces escape her eyes? Fan Xian felt a little strange. Why had Haiding brought him to the temple where Sea Lily was staying? And where were the palace nannies who had always served Sea Lily? Did Haiding not know that as a foreign official, he should maintain a distance of 3,000 miles from the woman the Emperor of Northern Qi wanted? This is where I live. Haidang explained the confusion in Fan Xian's heart. It is not convenient for Lily to enter the palace, so His Majesty has asked me to take care of her. Fan Xian laughed bitterly. Only now did he remember that Sea Lily had once said that these two girls were close friends in the Northern Qi Palace.
He suddenly thought of something.
Could it be that he also lived in the palace? Although the temple was far away, Fan Xian still had some reservations. After a few casual words, he said to Haidang, I will wait for you outside. Without waiting for Haidang and Sea Lily to reply, he left the door and waited outside in the courtyard. After he left, Haidang quietly looked at Sea Lily. After a moment of silence, she suddenly said, I brought him here to see you. Don't you have anything to say to him? Sea Lily raised her head, and a trace of confusion flashed across her charming face. She said quietly, I said I don't want to see him, and I reckon he doesn't want to see me either. Right now, he is outside the door, and I don't know how he will complain about you. Haidang, you are too reckless. Even if you are He's disciple, you should do less of this taboo thing. Haidang smiled gently. What is there to be afraid of? Our Majesty is not a petty person. In another elegant and clean small room, wisps of fragrance gradually filled the meditation room. The tea on the table mixed with the amber color of the furniture, making people feel very tranquil. Why did you bring me to see Sea Lily? Fan Xian sat cross-legged on the other side of the tea table, frowning. His elegant face finally showed some worry. He was working hard to make arrangements for Xiao but Sea Lily was a hot potato. I told you about Yan Bingyun earlier, Haiding said with a smile. I wanted to see if Master Fan was the same as the other filthy things in the world. The term impure substance is novel and absurd. Have you never read the story of the stone, Master Fan? Haiding seemed surprised. Fan Xian's heart skipped a beat, and he didn't respond. He just smiled bitterly and said, Miss Haiding, have you misunderstood something? Miss Sea Lily is just a criminal I've been escorting along the way. She's just a target in the agreement. I have nothing to do with her. My lord, you've misunderstood me. Haiding said softly, Today, I have invited you to my humble abode because there is something I need your help with.
What is it?
Fan Xian asked directly. Haiding smiled and said, Actually, it's something His Majesty was worried about when he left you in the palace. Fan Xian looked at her and found that her ordinary face easily made people feel close to her. He asked curiously, Clearly, His Majesty didn't want you to know about his troubles at the time. Haiding used her left hand to gently roll up the sleeve of her right hand. With 2 fingers, she brought a small teacup to her lips. She slowly took a sip and said, "The Emperor truly did not want me to know in the beginning, but his distress and I have been good friends for many years. Furthermore, in the Qi court, there are not many people, other than me, who are willing to help him resolve this distress. I've always been confused." Fan Xian could, of course, guess what the young emperor of Northern Qi was worried about. He smiled and said, "Since everyone in the court is opposed to see Lily entering the palace, why does your emperor still insist on going his own way?" Looking at the current situation, Si Lily can only temporarily stay in Miss Haitong's residence, and presumably the Empress Dowager won't allow her to enter the palace. Master Fan, are you suspecting that there's more to this matter?
Correct.
I've never believed that there's such a thing as affection in the royal family. For some reason, Fan Xian was faintly unhappy, and his words were much sharper. Haiding stared at him calmly. After a while, she said, "Emperors are also people. How can you say anything about the matters between men and women?" Fan Xian shook his head and thought of the emperors of his previous world. Perhaps Emperor Xuanzong of Tang was an exception, but in the end, didn't Yang Guifei turn into a wisp of a fragrant soul at Maui? Master Fan is already married, Haiding said casually. Fan Xian was slightly surprised. He thought of his wife at home and of their first meeting in front of the incense burner in the Temple of Qing. He couldn't help but smile, full of happiness. Haiding looked at his facial expression and sighed to herself. She smiled and said, "I hear that Master Fan and your wife are very close. If someone tried to stop you two from being together, what would you do?" Fan Xian raised his eyebrows and did not reply. But if there really was someone in this world who dared to come between him and Wana, that person must be seeking death. Gradually, he seemed to understand the feelings of the young emperor in the palace. But when he thought of how the emperor admired Si Lily, Fan Xian still felt a little strange. Even though the agreement between him and Si Lily was that they were only in a mutually beneficial relationship, Haidong's request was actually what Fan Xian wanted. If Si Lily couldn't enter the palace, the only thing that would be lost would be the Overwatch Council of Qing. He just couldn't guess why she would want to find him. Haiding said, "No one in the court is willing to help His Majesty welcome Si Lily into the palace. You should know that Si Lily's identity in the south is problematic. After all, I am limited by my status and have no right to speak in this matter." Fan Xian laughed coldly. "She's working for Northern Qi." He then asked, "Do I have any right to speak? I'm just a foreign official. After Wudu, this matter should have nothing to do with me." Haiding smiled. "His Majesty, and I only wish to borrow your wisdom, Master Fan." Fan Xian couldn't help but laugh. He gently smoothed down the hair on his head with his fingers. "Miss Haiding, you truly think highly of me." Haiding calmly said, "Master Fan was originally a nameless person, but in a year's time, you've become the world's most famous immortal poet, a powerful figure in the South. If you say you have no wisdom, no one in the world would believe you. I'll think of something, but I don't know if it will work." Fan Xian picked up a cup of tea and drank it in one gulp. The key is still the Empress Dowager. If she isn't willing, nothing will work. Haiding stood up and bowed slightly. "I thank you in advance. It seems that the relationship between you and Si Lily is not shallow." Fan Xian bowed in return. "If I ever need your help in the future, I hope you will remember the friendship between us today." Haiding expressionlessly replied, "As long as it doesn't involve the politics of our country, I promise to do so." Fan Xian said, "Don't worry. What I want you to do may never happen. If it does, it will only be an internal problem of the Kingdom of Qing, and you won't have to go against the natural order that you've always pursued." "That's good." Haiding relaxed a little. As the head envoy of the South, all of Fan Xian's movements in Shangjing had to be monitored by the court of Northern Qi. This was a tacit understanding and habit between the two sides, so it was rare for him to have complete freedom of movement. But today was an exception. Fan Xian was taking a stroll with Haiding, and Haiding clearly didn't like the rats of the brocade guard following them, so they walked together under an umbrella. It looked like they were strolling leisurely, but they had thrown off all the spies. He believed that the brocade guard wouldn't have the courage to follow them even after Haidang had clearly expressed her hostility. After leaving the wondrous little temple where the two girls lived, Fan Xian stretched. He didn't see any familiar brocade guard around the corner. A happy smile appeared on his face, and he walked into an alleyway at the corner of the street. There was no clear sky after the rain. Only a cool breeze blew the dew that fell from the branches, brushing past his cheeks. Thinking of Sea Lily and the Emperor, Fan Xian still didn't quite understand. But the topic that Haidang had just mentioned made this 17-year-old man's thoughts return to the capital, to the side of his wife and sister. Homesickness began to rise, and a warm feeling began to fill his chest. Occasionally, pedestrians passed by the alley. Some laborers were pushing handcarts, taking shortcuts to get to the shops where they worked. Fan Xian's face wore a gentle smile, as beautiful as the sun, and he slowly walked toward the alley. A handcart came from behind him, and as it brushed past him, Fan Xian flicked his wrist, and the black dagger he had been holding in his palm stabbed horizontally. With a muffled squelch, the dagger pierced the throat of a spy dressed as a laborer. The cold blade entered the flesh, and the man fell to the ground. In the next moment, Fan Xian was already stepping on the overturned handcart. His whole body floated to the end of the alley, like a shadow. His fingers held a poisonous needle, and he stabbed it into a major acupoint in the chest of a man. His left hand strangely shot out from under his right armpit, and 3 crossbow bolts shot out at the same time, nailing a stunned man to death. With a backhand slap, he shattered the neck of the paralyzed man. Fan Xian took off his clothes, turned over, and used the rain hat to cover his face and his sunny smile. He pulled the crossbow bolts from the dead man's body and walked out of the alley. Chapter 229. After leaving the small temple, Fan Xian had been followed by 3 people. He didn't know if they were spies from the brocade guard or people from the palace, but no matter which side they were from, Fan Xian would not allow anyone to follow him today. After pulling out these 3 spies, Fan Xian confirmed that no one was following him, and then he began his next step. After leaving the alley, he did not take a carriage, because any opportunity to come into contact with people could leave behind clues that Northern Qi could find. On the wet street, the number of people gradually increased. Using the crowd as cover, Fan Xian lowered his head and walked silently among the people of a foreign country. According to the Overwatch Council's anti-tailing rules, he should be looking for a cloth shop and then go through a back door. After a few more turns, he would be able to reach his destination. But Fan Xian did not use this method. First, he was confident that no one was following him. Second, he thought that if he made too many turns and came into contact with too many people, it would be easier for him to be discovered. Along the way, he carefully snuck into an official's manor. Coincidentally, it began to rain again in Shangjing. The rain was silent, but it was tangible, and it effectively hid his tracks. Near the musical house in the south of Shangjing, there was a residential area for commoners called Zhangjiadian. This place was a mix of good people and bad people, but it had been relatively safe these past few years. In addition, living expenses were cheap, so it gradually became lively. The small peddlers who did not have much capital began to muster up their courage and save up extra money. They bought a few shops on this street and began to do business. This place was not like Xiaoshui Street, where daily necessities were sold. The prices were cheap and the quality was not very good. The third shop from the east was such an ordinary place. This shop sold oil. The oil was palm oil from Dongyi. Although it was cheap and tasted good, the color was not very good. Especially during the winter, there was always a layer of white flocculation. So, generally, wealthy families with a bit of money would rather use rapeseed oil from the east of Qi. Fortunately, there were always many people who did not have spare money, so this oil shop that did not even have a signboard could still survive. However, they did not dare to hire too many people. Other than an old shopkeeper, they only hired a helper and a waiter. It had rained repeatedly today, so there were not many pedestrians in Zhangjiadian. Today, it seemed even more empty. However, the oil shop's business had nothing to do with the weather. Whoever ran out of oil would naturally come, so the old shopkeeper of the oil shop was not in a hurry. Instead, he moved a long stool and sat in front of his door, staring blankly at the rain outside the shop. Perhaps the shopkeeper was really getting old. The young workers in the shop felt that the number of times the shopkeeper was in a daze this year was much more than before. "Shopkeeper, I want to buy oil." A person stood at the entrance of the oil shop, blocking the dim sunlight outside. The old shopkeeper waved his hand, indicating for him to enter by himself. The man took off his rain hat, revealing a plain face. He smiled, walked into the shop, and said to the yawning shop assistant, "Young man, I want to buy oil." The shop assistant smiled and said, "What kind of oil do you want?" "Other than palm oil, our shop also has a new batch of rapeseed oil from Qidonglai." The shop assistant's attitude was respectful, but he was muttering to himself, "Of course people who come to our shop want to buy oil. Isn't this nonsense?" The man said, "Give me half a caddy of palm oil." The shop assistant replied crisply, "Okay." He nimbly poured oil into the scale, and then found that the man's hands were empty. He couldn't help but scratch his head. "Sir, what do you use to carry it? Do you have a pot here?" "Yes, a wooden pot is 3 copper coins." The shop assistant was very happy to have made another business. The man did not speak after taking the oil pot, as if he was still thinking about something. The shop assistant asked curiously, "What else do you want? Do you have sesame oil? Do you have sesame oil?" The question was very soft and not very loud, but the old shopkeeper's withered right hand, which was sitting outside the shop and propping itself up on the bench, trembled slightly. The shop assistant said unhappily, "We don't have such good goods in our shop. In the whole of Zhangjiadian, who can afford to eat sesame oil?" As he spoke, the old shopkeeper had already slowly walked back to the counter and waved his hand to signal the shop assistant to leave. He looked at the customer with a face full of smiles and explained, "Sesame oil is too expensive. Except for when it's used to worship the heavens, no one usually buys it. There's still half a year until the day of worship, so our shop hasn't stocked up yet." The man smiled and said, "Other than worshiping the heavens, worshiping people is also possible." The old shopkeeper's smile became even more respectful. He said, "Then tell me the quantity. We can order it on your behalf." The conversation had reached a crucial point, so both of them spoke softly. However, that person's memory must be very good, so he was able to clearly state the weight of the next batch without any ambiguity. "I want to buy 7 caddies, 3 taels, 9 xian, and 4 hao palm oil." The old shopkeeper was calculating with his abacus, and then he looked troubled. He said, "There's a problem with the price. Sir, let's go into the inner room and talk." "That's fine." The old shopkeeper ordered the shop assistant to keep watch outside, and then he led the customer into the back room. The shop assistant now knew that the man wasn't here to buy oil, but to sell oil. He couldn't help but stick out his tongue, thinking that he was lucky he hadn't offended the owner of the sesame oil business. This sesame oil merchant was, of course, Fan Xian in disguise. He followed the old shopkeeper into the back room, only to find that it was completely different from the meeting place he had imagined. It was actually bright and clear. There was no tea, no small talk. The old shopkeeper stared into Fan Xian's eyes, and there was a trace of caution in his old, muddy eyes. He said, "Sir, you came from the south?" Fan Xian nodded. The old shopkeeper made a gesture of invitation. Fan Xian sighed in his heart, thinking that Yan Bingyun's procedure was a bit complicated. Helpless, he could only report another number that he had firmly memorized. Only now did the old shopkeeper confirm the other party's identity. Only then did he relax. He took out a small knife dipped in poison from his sleeve with trembling hands and placed it in his hand. Fan Xian knew that if the man was a spy from the kingdom of Qi, the old shopkeeper would have to kill him as soon as possible. This was also why Yan Bingyun felt so humiliated after being captured alive. The old shopkeeper looked at him and said, "Sir, what position do you hold in the Overwatch Council?" Fan Xian shook his head. "I don't think the situation at hand allows us to be long-winded." The old shopkeeper laughed bitterly. "It's already been a year. It's been a whole year since we've received any news from above. After the incident, the court hasn't sent anyone to take over. I thought the court was going to let us enter a period of silence. The so-called period of silence was when, as soon as a gap appeared in the spy system of an enemy country, they would immediately stop all operations to avoid being exposed. This period could only be a month, or it could be 10 years. Fan Xian frowned. Yan Bingyun's capture was the most unlikely thing to happen in a spy war between the two countries, because Yan Bingyun didn't need to carry intelligence back to his country and personally investigate such dangerous matters. But the eldest princess's move had paralyzed the entire network of the Overwatch Council in the north. Yan Bingyun had always been in the hands of Northern Qi, and the court and the Overwatch Council didn't dare to take the risk of contacting them. That was why there had been a year of silence. I hope that after a year of silence, everyone's bodies haven't rusted. Sir, please be at ease. The old shopkeeper knew that if this man had come to take over Yan Bingyun's position, he must be an important figure in the council, and he could faintly smell the scent of blood on him. The old shopkeeper's reply was especially careful. Sir, please give the order. 3 matters, some urgent, some slow. Fan Xian looked at the old man in front of him. He knew that this old man, as well as the countless other spies in the council, must have had a difficult year. They were like wandering orphans with no home to return to, so he deliberately softened his tone. The most urgent thing is to immediately find out where Xiao An is being held. The second matter is to investigate the real reason for the enmity between the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. This was something that Fan Xian had never understood. The young emperor seemed to have eaten too much. The old shopkeeper's expression didn't change. Although he knew that either of these two tasks would be extremely difficult, he only quietly waited for the man in front of him to issue the third order. Investigate Xiao An's matter quickly. The matters in the palace can wait. Fan Xian muttered to himself, As for the third order, I think you should know that the palace treasury has been smuggling goods northward for the past few years. The old shopkeeper narrowed his eyes. For the first time, a strange light appeared in his eyes. That is a problem in Xinjiang. Sir, has the council finally decided to act? Fan Xian shook his head and quietly said, Investigate thoroughly for me. However, don't touch a single hair on them. You have to control all of the joints that can be controlled. If the council wants to act in the future, you have to make sure you have enough things in your hands to salvage this entire trail clean. Understood. The old shopkeeper knew that this was a long-term task that could be taken slowly. But Fan Xian was thinking about something else. He didn't know if the matter with Master Cui was a test from his mother-in-law, or if she had something to ask of him, so he had to bear with it for now. Although Xinjiang had never known that Fan Xian was the culprit behind the incident with Yanji and Guangxin Palace, the conflict in the Great Hall of the Ministry of Justice had gradually brought the conflict between him and the eldest princess to the surface. Chapter 230. How should I reply, sir? This was a crucial point. Fan Xian didn't know how Yan Bingyun had managed to communicate with his subordinates, so he didn't dare act rashly. He only said quietly, Within 2 months, there shouldn't be any specific executors coming to Shangjing, but I will temporarily assign someone to be responsible for contacting you. The old shopkeeper looked worried. Sir, please be careful. Although the brocade guard of Northern Qi couldn't compare to the Red Cavalry of Northern Wei in the past 20 years since Xiao An was captured, I still have to consider the children under me. Fan Xian nodded. This was why the Overwatch Council hadn't dared to take the risk of contacting these orphans, even after a year. He said quietly, Don't worry. The person I'm looking for is the one least likely to be followed in the council. Without question, he was talking about Wang Qinian, the one who had spent his entire life following others but had never been followed by anyone. He couldn't stay in this place for long. After saying a few more words, Fan Xian got up and prepared to leave. Before he left, he suddenly said, Change the secret signal. Yes, sir. The old shopkeeper bowed slightly. 131452777777. Yes, sir. The old shopkeeper repeated the seemingly random number without a single mistake. Fan Xian nodded, somewhat satisfied. He returned to the front hall and saluted the old shopkeeper like a merchant, not forgetting to carry the 2 pots of tung oil in his hands. Seeing the merchant leave, the young shopkeeper joked, "Boss, you're ready to bring in the oil so early?" The old shopkeeper looked at the only shopkeeper in the shop and smiled. "Yes, there's a big deal coming." The shopkeeper thought to himself, could his shabby oil shop be like those oil merchants in Dongyi and do a few big deals? A few hundred caddies of business was a big deal. The young man couldn't help but look down on the shopkeeper's lack of ambition. On the way, Fan Xian carefully disposed of the oil in his hands. He didn't dare give it to the beggars on the street, nor did he dare throw it away. One of the most important rules of the Overwatch Council's secret agents was not to underestimate the enemy's ability. Although Xinzhong, the commander of the Brocade Guard of Northern Qi, did not appear to be very powerful in that rainy night in the brothel, Fan Xian knew that was definitely just a facade. After cleanly disposing of the oil pot, Fan Xian set out on his way back to the diplomatic mission. The sky was already dark, and there were few people on the road. As he passed the arch bridge over the Yuchuan River in Shangjing, Fan Xian rubbed his face a few times under the canopy, wiping away all of the rouge from the young lady's home. He squeezed it into a small yellow and red powder in his palm. His palm gently stroked the lion on the stone arch bridge. The powder fell from his palm and quietly mixed with the river water under the bridge. No one could find any trace of it. Descending the bridge and passing through the alley, Fan Xian emerged from the side of a house. He had already restored his original appearance. He had taken off his rain hat and flipped his robe. He looked just like he had when he had just parted with Haidang. His face was delicate and his expression elegant. He swaggered back to the diplomatic mission. The Brocade Guard, who had been drinking tea for many days, looked at him strangely. Fan Xian knew that the news of the 3 spies' deaths must have reached Xinzhong's ears. But the Brocade Guard could only swallow this loss. As for when they would be able to retaliate, that was not within Fan Xian's scope of consideration. In the most secluded courtyard of the courtyard, under the long eaves, Yan Bingyun was lying on a low couch. The couch was piled with soft brocade blankets. Although Fan Xian had treated his wounds, the torment he had suffered over the past year could not be healed in a short period of time. His body was injured all over and could not withstand strong contact. So Fan Xian thought of a way to bury him in a pile of cotton. Fortunately, the weather had not been too hot. Although he knew that this indifferent northern spy chief was now physically and mentally exhausted and needed time to rest, Fan Xian still felt a bit ashamed to disturb him. Because in these last few days in northern Qi, he had to rely on Yan Bingyun's methods. After a brief explanation of the day's situation, Yan Bingyun looked at Fan Xian gloomily and said quietly, "I hope you did not leave behind any traces. Otherwise, if all my subordinates were to be uprooted, even if you are the commissioner of the council, I will definitely report you." Fan Xian shook his head. "I know you have more power than just this line of communication. Although one-way communication is safe, the efficiency is too low. You must think of a way to move the other areas as well. But I don't think I have the time to deal with them. I am going to hand them over to Wang Qinian. What do you think of this proposal?" A strange look flashed in Yan Bingyun's eyes. This was the youngest high-ranking official of the council. These days, his performance could only be described as average. His greatest strength was that he was good at listening to Yan Bingyun's opinions. But today, he had exposed the Northern Network with a single sentence. It seemed that he had some ability. "I am not worried about Wang Qinian," he thought for a moment. Master Wang is one of the earliest people to be hidden in the north. Fan Xian was slightly surprised. He had not expected Wang Qinian to have done such a thing. He heard Yan Bingyun say, "According to your plan, we will cooperate with Shang Shanhu to dig out Xiao En's whereabouts. But I do not want the people of the council to get too involved." Fan Xian agreed to his request. He knew that Yan Bingyun did not want the people hidden in the north to sacrifice too many lives for the sake of the internal strife of the court. "Don't worry. I know what I am doing." Yan Bingyun frowned. Shang Shanhu is a lion. Unfortunately, in the deep waters of Shangjing, he could not find a place to borrow his strength. That is why he sought the help of the eldest princess. As officials, it is only natural that you and I act according to the will of the eldest princess. However, you must know your limits. I believe that the day Shang Shanhu makes his move to save Shao and will be the day the Empress Dowager and Shen Zhong purge the army. Fan Xian knew that this cold-faced official of the Overwatch Council had guessed what he wanted to do, so he didn't say anything more. He only said quietly, "This is exactly what I want to see. I will not underestimate Shen Zhong's ability to monitor Shangjing, let them fight it out. In any case, it will not harm the kingdom of Qing." Leaving the rear courtyard, Fan Xian found Wang Qinian and gave him the task. Wang Qinian remembered the string of numbers clearly. He knew that in the following days, he would have to shoulder this dangerous and important task. He was not the old shopkeeper of the oil shop. He was Fan Xian's most trusted aide, and so he gathered his courage and asked, 13145277777. Master, this string of numbers seems to represent something. All my life, I love money, money, money. Fan Xian laughed. In the dialect of Danzhou, the pronunciation of money and 7 was very similar. The old shopkeeper of the oil shop had been doing well these past few days. He had sold a few barrels of oil, and a piece of information hidden in the dark began to circulate through the northern department of the 4th Bureau of the Overwatch Council, which had been silent for a year. It did not take long for the spies, who had disguised themselves as the various commoners of northern Qi, to receive their first task after a year. The information began to be fed back through various channels. It was summarized at several points on the line, and finally delivered to the oil shop in Zhangjiadian. At the same time, the Qing diplomatic mission held a few banquets, and their drinking capacity had increased considerably. Naturally, shopkeeper Sheng of Xiushui Street could not help but make a few trips to the diplomatic mission's courtyard and flatter Fan Xian a few times. He believed that from Fan Xian, he had obtained the information that Xinyang and Shang Shanhu had always wanted. The person who handled a lot of information and analyzed it and finally came to a relatively accurate conclusion was Yan Bingyun. Over the past few days, the sound of his coughing could often be heard coming from the rear courtyard. Fan Xian did not have much to do. After all, he was the head of the diplomatic mission. Drinking and greeting were the proper things to do. On this day, he entered the palace accompanied by Haidang. A few days ago, Haidang had told him that the Empress Dowager had invited him to the palace to discuss important matters. Drinking, for Fan Xian, had always been a happy thing, and drinking with the Empress Dowager of an enemy country was not a depressing matter. But when Fan Xian returned to the diplomatic mission, all of his officials and subordinates knew that he was in a bad mood, but no one knew why. Inside the room, Fan Xian looked coldly at Lin Jing. "In this diplomatic mission, am I the head envoy, or is it you, Sir Lin?" Lin Jing was uneasy. "Why do you say that, Sir Fan?" he asked nervously. "Naturally, the diplomatic mission will follow your lead." Good. Fan Xian laughed. "Then tell me, Sir Lin, why did the Empress Dowager say that the princess of Northern Qi was going to be married to the great prince of our dynasty? What a big deal! Why was it that I did not know about this even after I left? You had already made all the arrangements for the princess marriage at the office of the Grand Herald and Taichung Temple. Only now did I know that I had to send off the bride on my way back." Lin Jing let out a sigh of relief. So that was what had happened.
He laughed.
"Sir," he replied, "please do not blame me and Sir Linwen. The diplomatic mission only passed on the Empress Dowager's handwritten letter to the Empress Dowager of Northern Qi. How could we, the officials, have known that it was 2 women who had decided on the marriage of their own children in a letter? When word of this came out of the palace, what could we say? We were supposed to inform you of this, sir, but you have been away from the diplomatic mission for a few days, so we were delayed." Lin Jing rolled his eyes. He knew that this young man was a little angry. He smiled and handed over a letter. "The official letter will arrive soon. This is a secret letter from the court, expressing the attitude of His Majesty and the Empress Dowager. Of course, they are willing to carry out this marriage. In fact, there are 2 other happy events that I wish to congratulate you, Sir Fan. Chapter 231. Congratulations, my ass. Making a scene. Making a scene. As soon as Fan Xian thought of all the things that had happened, he was furious. He even learned Qin Fingfing's catchphrase and laughed. Those old women eat too much pickled vegetables and worry too much. Aren't they afraid that they'll tire us runners to death? Lin Wen was startled. What a disgraceful thing to say. He hurriedly explained, the affairs of the court have their own rules, but the affairs of the palace have their own channels. You don't need to worry too much, sir. Fan Xian nodded. Although this marriage seemed a bit ridiculous, seeing how anxious the 2 courts were, it was a situation that everyone wanted to see. But Southern Qing and Northern Qi were known as the 2 most powerful countries in the world. If these 2 countries were to unite by marriage, the emperors of the small countries hiding far away would probably not be happy. Of course, the biggest headache would be the city of Dongyi, which was guarded by Sigu Jian's sword. Oh, right. You said I have something to celebrate? Fan Xian frowned. He didn't know what the great prince's marriage, which was scheduled to return to the capital in early autumn, had to do with him. Lin Jing and Lin Wen looked at each other and laughed. Sir, you'll know when you read the letter from the court. According to custom, when the court sent a letter, if the head envoy was not present, Lin Jing, as the deputy envoy, had the authority to open it first. Go ahead. Fan Xian rubbed the space between his brows. He didn't know where this feeling came from, but it was getting stronger and stronger. Yes. Lin Jing responded with a smile. After the great prince's marriage is set, so is the second prince's. His Majesty has decreed that the second prince's marriage to Yi Linger, the daughter of the Yi family of the Jingdou garrison, is set for next spring. Fan Xian was a little surprised. He grunted and felt a strange feeling in his heart. The girl who had called him teacher by the lake was also going to be married? He had seen the second prince before and knew that the second prince was well-read, but had a restless heart. Hearing that Yi Linger was going to marry the second prince, he couldn't help but worry for her. At the same time, he wondered what the emperor wanted to do. This marriage would clearly tie the Yi family, which guarded the capital, to the second prince. Did the emperor really want to change the heir? Fan Xian's heart jumped, but his expression was unusually calm. He tilted his head slightly and said, What does this have to do with me? Lin Wen said with a flattering smile, Congratulations, Master Fan. Congratulations, Master Fan. His Majesty also mentioned in his edict that the young lady of your manor is virtuous, and that she has been granted marriage to Li Hongqing, Crown Prince of King Jing, young miss of your noble family. Fan Xian was a little confused and felt a little stupid. Which manor was this? It took him a while to react. Could it be Ruoruo? Sister Ruoruo was going to marry Li Hongqing? No. To everyone's surprise, Fan Xian suddenly stood up and waved his sleeve. The officials next to him had their mouths wide open. They didn't know why Fan Xian would have such a strong reaction after hearing about his sister's marriage. Everyone congratulated Fan Xian. His congratulations came from the bottom of his heart. Count Sinan was the Minister of Appointments and was in charge of the Qing Kingdom's finances. Fan Xian was the Commissioner of the Overwatch Council, and His Majesty had arranged for him to marry the daughter of the former Prime Minister. That young lady also had a noble identity that everyone knew, but did not dare mention. Now, even the young lady of the Fan family had been betrothed to Crown Prince Li Hongqing. There was no one else in the court who was so favored by the emperor. Fan Xian's reaction was no. Fan Xian lost his composure for a moment. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the stunned expressions on everyone's faces. His mind was a mess, but he quickly came to his senses and laughed. That won't do. Li Hongqing visits brothels every day. If he doesn't spend a few hundred jars of fine wine with me, my brother-in-law, I won't let my sister marry him. He hit it well. The officials all knew that the Fan family was on good terms with King Jing's family and that he was good friends with Crown Prince Jing. His words were indeed a joke. The officials all laughed. They said that Fan Xian was humorous, and that when they returned to the capital, they would visit him at his manor. Some even said that they would go with Fan Xian to find Crown Prince Jing and extort some fine wine. Fan Xian's eyebrows danced as he happily chatted with the officials. He was very much like a happy brother who had heard that his sister was about to get married. After everyone had dispersed, Fan Xian walked alone to the secluded rear courtyard. Standing next to a pillar, he looked at the stars emerging from the gaps in the dark clouds in the southern sky.
He was silent for a long time.
His sister was going to get married. His sister was going to get married. Fan Xian narrowed his eyes, watching the dim stars twinkling between the heavy clouds in the night sky. His heart palpitated, and his mind was filled with that sentence. He had long known that this was something that was bound to happen. Not long after he had come to this world, when he was in Danzhou telling the story of Snow White to the yellow-haired girl, Fan Xian knew that the yellow-skinned monkey in front of him would one day get married. In the letters that came and went between Danzhou and the capital, he would occasionally think that the little girl on the other end of the letter would grow up to marry a man. Later, when he came to the capital, he saw that there was a trace of ice and snow hidden between her brows. She was also as intelligent as ice and snow. She saw him as a teacher and respected him as a brother. Fan Xian laughed and thought that if any ordinary man married her in the future, he would certainly have a hard time. But at some point, perhaps from the day Fan Xian guessed his past, Fan Xian began to subconsciously refuse to think about the future of Roro's sister. Even when the emperor, who was traveling incognito, told the siblings in the tea-house by the Lujing River that he would arrange a good marriage for Roro in the future, Fan Xian still refused to think about it. But things never changed according to one's will. After Fan Xian got married, Roro's marriage naturally became a problem that had to be solved immediately. Fan Xian unconsciously gently patted the pillar next to him. His mind was a mess. Although he had once talked about this problem with his sister and vowed that as her brother, he would definitely find her a good husband, when it came to matters like this, Fan Xian, who always liked to pretend to be confused, was in a rare state of confusion. It was as if there were countless threads running back and forth in his mind, making it difficult for him to breathe and unable to think. Clap, clap, clap. The sound of palms hitting the pillar echoed softly in the courtyard. Very noisy. A cold voice came from the other end of the corridor. Fan Xian laughed bitterly. He had been so shaken up today that he had forgotten that the courtyard he lived in was also occupied by the equally cold Yan Bingyun. "Sir, your mind seems to be in a mess today." Yan Bingyun wasn't concerned about him. He was just curious as to why this commissioner of the Overwatch Council, who was used to hiding all his thoughts and only giving others the appearance of sunshine, was so sad tonight. Fan Xian pulled his gaze back from the dark night sky. He thought for a moment and then said, "My sister's going to get married." "The young lady of the Fan family?" Yan Bingyun said quietly. "A famous and talented woman in the capital. Presumably, it was His Majesty who arranged the marriage."
"Correct."
"My future brother-in-law is Crown Prince Jing, Li Hongcheng," Yan Bingyun said. "All the young people in the capital know that the Crown Prince likes your sister." Fan Xian was surprised. "Really? Why don't I know? I heard that you and Li Hongcheng had a good deal. Now that your manor is connected by marriage with King Jing in the southern court, other than a few members of the royal family, there are no officials who can compare to the Fan manor. I must congratulate you, sir." Fan Xian felt that Yan Bingyun's cold congratulations were mixed with a hint of malice. He tilted his head slightly and smiled. "It is indeed a happy occasion." "If it is a happy occasion, why are you worried, sir?" Fan Xian smiled. "Hongcheng is my friend. Of course I like his temperament, but," he shrugged, "a dissolute prince who frequents pleasure boats is about to become my brother-in-law. I think anyone would be worried." Yan Bingyun coughed lightly and said mockingly, "Have you never been to a brothel in your life, Sir Fan?" Fan Xian smiled and shook his head. He was in a strange mood today, so he didn't want to argue with Yan Bingyun. There were no candles in the room, and the stars in the sky could be counted. The courtyard was dark. Fan Xian turned his head and saw Yan Bingyun's cold expression, which couldn't be erased in the night. He suddenly had a thought and blurted out, "Do you want to marry my sister?" "Nonsense." Yan Bingyun rebuked the commissioner for his absurd question. Fan Xian shrugged and sighed. "You're right. You only love yourself. How would you know how to love a woman?" Yan Bingyun didn't want to pay attention to him. Fan Xian looked at him and said, "How do you and Miss Shen end up? She was cheated by you. Shen Zhong isn't someone to be trifled with." Yan Bingyun's face was as cold as ice, but Fan Xian's sharp eyes finally found a trace of sadness in his eyes for the first time. He only heard him say quietly, "I'm not a pervert like you. As for Shen, there's nothing between me and her." Fan Xian understood that Yan Bingyun and Miss Shen were destined to be apart for the rest of their lives, looking at each other from afar. Although he didn't know if Yan Bingyun had any feelings for her in the process, he felt some guilt towards such an infatuated woman. His thoughts turned back to Roro's marriage, and a faint worry floated up in his heart. Actually, everyone was right. His sister marrying Li Hongcheng was better than marrying one of the princes. Fan Xian should be happy, but he couldn't be happy. Actually, in his heart, even he didn't know what he was thinking. Perhaps it was only some details, some initial reactions, such as standing up in front of him and the sad clapping of his hands afterwards, that revealed the deepest desires in Fan Xian's heart that he didn't even realize he had. He said to Yan Bingyun in the corridor, "Miss Shen naturally can't marry you. But if, and I'm saying if there was such a possibility, what would you do?" "I never think of the impossible," Yan Bingyun replied coldly. Fan Xian smiled and left the long corridor. Yan Bingyun watched his lonely figure disappear into the darkness and fell into deep thought. Chapter 232. 3 marriages, just 3 small interludes. That seemed to be the case. No one knew of Fan Xian's troubles. Whenever he thought of that faint possibility, Fan Xian felt a chill run through his body, and he didn't know what to say. Far away in a foreign country, Wu Zhu, the only person who had no taboos, seemed to have disappeared.
There was no one he could talk to about this.
There was nothing that couldn't be said to others, but this couldn't be said to others. In the eyes of others, Fan Xian seemed to be very happy and had already begun to make arrangements for the diplomatic mission's return to the capital. The officials thought that Fan Xian was rushing back to the capital to prepare for his sister's marriage and, at the same time, wanted to seize the opportunity to benefit from the court's arrangements after the marriage. No one knew that under Fan Xian's calm, even joyful appearance, he had long since shaken off the shock of the time and had begun to act according to the plan he had devised long ago, step by step. Yan Bingyun's words helped Fan Xian to a certain extent. Fan Xian thought that Sir Yan was right to a certain extent. What was the point of thinking so much about something that was impossible? But at the same time, he told himself that if Roro was willing to marry, as her brother, he would make sure her marriage was glorious, happy, and blessed. Even if Li Hongcheng was involved in the second prince's struggle for the throne, for Roro's sake, he would ensure the peace of King Jing's manor. Of course, if Roro did not want to marry, then it would be a completely different story. Having thought this through, Fan Xian regained his calm, or, at least on the surface. He had entered the palace twice these past few days, mainly to deal with the first marriage alliance since the founding of the 2 countries. This was an important matter, and no one, including Fan Xian, dared to be negligent. What made Fan Xian somewhat happy was that, under the pressure of the harem, Shen Zhong and Chang Ningho had finally lowered their heads. The secret service organizations of the 2 countries had a preliminary idea of how to distribute the goods from the north through irregular channels, as well as specific measures. In this plan, Fan Xian, as an important figure in both the Overwatch Council and the Palace Treasury, would naturally reap the most benefits. In reality, what Fan Xian was happy about was not the matter itself. Although his plans in the future would require financial support, the gains from smuggling were not as great as Fan Xian's plans. What truly made him happy was that, since he was going to make changes to the channel, then the output of goods from Xinjiang would certainly be reduced, and the income would certainly be reduced. The eldest princess' power would presumably be weakened. Fan Xian also understood that the eldest princess had allowed this to happen because he had promised Xinyang that he would cooperate with Shang Shanhu and rescue Xiao En, who was hiding a shocking secret. This seemed to show that the eldest princess still placed the interests of the Qing court above her own. This, which was a bit like an act, surprised Fan Xian. It was also during these few days that the patient Yan Bingyun's ability to plan things was demonstrated to its greatest extent. When Fan Xian held the case file, he couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Yan Bingyun's methods were simple, but they were the safest and most appropriate. They preserved the safety of the Qing forces hidden in the north to the greatest extent. There were many kinds of spies in the Qing kingdom. Yan Bingyun controlled secret agents, such as the oil shopkeepers and the attendants hidden in the manors of the nobles, and even some officials. There were also open spies, such as the shopkeepers on Xiaoshui Street and the merchants from the south. Their main purpose was to do business, but they traveled the world, so they naturally had to send useful information back to the Qing kingdom. These few days, open spies and secret agents began to exert themselves. The intelligence system, which had been in hibernation for a year, began to awaken and immediately displayed its powerful investigative abilities. Everything was ready. All that was left was for Shang Shanhu to make his move. Fan Xian and Yan Bingyun sat in the diplomatic mission, drinking wine in a relaxed manner. Fan Xian looked at the extremely cold Yan Bingyun and said, "Sir Yan, you are my subordinate after all. Can you not give me that look every day?" "I am not a flattering subordinate," Yan Bingyun replied coldly. Fan Xian smiled. He knew that this man in front of him, who had been hiding in northern Qi for 4 years, had many different faces. Back then, who could have guessed that the great scholar Yun, the son of a sea merchant who wandered among the nobles, was actually the head spy of the Qing kingdom? Such a person had to be very good at socializing and very good at using money and power. Yan Bingyun was treating Fan Xian coldly because he was his superior, and not because he was the target he wanted to deal with. Northern Qi really is stupid. Fan Xian took a sip of tea. "I can't believe they let you out so early and let you stay in the diplomatic mission for so many days. If it were me, I wouldn't trade you for 10 divisions. This was an illusion from Fan Xian's previous life. Yan Bingyun didn't feel anything when he heard it, nor was he moved in the slightest. Perhaps they thought the royal court was stupid enough to trade Xiao En for me. Thinking of this, Yan Bingyun still felt a little depressed. But Northern Qi didn't have much use for Xiao En, and they still had to think of a way to kill him. That was stupid to the extreme. Fan Xian sighed and said, "Someone once said that a country is like a person. It can never be a perfectly functioning machine. Often, it changes according to the mood of the ruler. The royal family of Northern Qi was divided, but Ku He's light was too bright, so they imprisoned Xiao En again. If Shang Shanhu wasn't Xiao En's adopted son, I don't think anyone would dare to challenge the royal family's decision." "What about you?" Yan Bingyun frowned. "On the way north, you clearly had the opportunity to kill Xiao En, but you let him go. Now he's already in Shangjing, and you want to save him. After saving him, you want to. It really is a little strange." Fan Xian smiled. He wouldn't tell anyone about Xiao in secret, and it was because of this that the process of this matter gradually became absurd and laughable. He thought about it and explained to Yan Bingyun, "This is like playing chess. Although we all want to checkmate the other side's general in the end, the process of moving the pawns is different, and the benefits we gain from it are also different. If he had killed Xiao En on the banks of Wudu, the pawn Fan Xian had intended to abandon might not have been able to return to his country alive, and Fan Xian would never know where the temple was. And this time, he had used all the power of the Overwatch Council in the north to rescue Xiao En. Fan Xian only wanted to set up a common chessboard game, hoping that after so many twists and turns, he could gain something that even Chun Pingping couldn't. If Xiao En doesn't escape from prison, the brocade guard won't be easy to kill. After all, Shang Shanhu's reputation in the Northern Qi military is very high. Xiao En, that old devil. What a pitiful life." A voice sighed. "He's old and no longer the same as he was. I don't recommend you do it yourself." Yan Bingyun looked at him coldly. If Ku he really does put down his pride and make a move, how will you survive? Fan Xian was silent. He didn't dare let anyone else hear Xiao in secret, so he had to take the risk himself. He slowly tapped the tea table, closing his eyes and imagining himself as a chess player, moving the chessboard clumsily and inexperienced. On both sides of the chessboard were, of course, experienced and far-sighted people. Ku He and the eldest princess, the Empress Dowager, and Shang Shanhu. Compared to these people, Fan Xian was nothing. But Wan Tong had no other ability, but he had the courage to flip the chessboard. All the routine work was done. The diplomatic mission and the Northern Qi court breathed a sigh of relief and began to feast to their heart's content. Fan Xian was no exception. In the peaceful capital, the only strange thing was that along the banks of Yichuan River, there had been a number of strange murders. Along with these murders, there had been particularly frightening cases of arson. For a few days, the flames reflected a red glow on the river that the people of Northern Qi loved. Fan Xian knew very well what was hidden behind these murders. When the intelligence agents of the Kingdom of Qing, who had hibernated for a whole year, began to move, the provost of the Brocade Guard, Xinzhong, must have smelled something amiss. The Brocade Guard, who had taken root among the people of Shangjing, also began to react fiercely and appropriately. Yan Bingyan estimated that some of the hidden sentries he had set up had already been lost in these murders. After all, in a foreign country, it was impossible to conduct such a large transaction right under the nose of the enemy without alerting them. But the 4th Bureau's intelligence network in the north had been split into several pieces, so there was no fear of the Brocade Guard digging up too many strongholds. So Yan Bingyan's expression became more and more gloomy. The 4th Bureau of the Overwatch Council only had 17 spies in Shangjing. And now, for the sake of the eldest princess and Xiao En, they had paid such a heavy price. He could not help but be angry. Fan Xian did not say anything to comfort him, nor did he say anything. He just continued to drink, seek pleasure, and call in prostitutes. The 6th year of the Tianbao Kingdom, the 6th day of the 6th month of the Great Qi Kingdom. Fan Xian did not believe in the Western legends of the devil from his previous life, so his fingers were steady as he buttoned his cloak. He appeared full of confidence. He carefully sorted out his weapons and medicines. Some were in his belt, some were in his undergarments. Tied to his left forearm was a hidden crossbow that could fire 3 bolts at the same time. The 3rd Bureau of the Overwatch Council's secret smoking powder was in a bag about the size of a knuckle on his right wrist. Fan Xian looked at the metal box on the table, which was illuminated by the dim light, and narrowed his eyes. After the box was opened, there were 3 pills, red, blue, and white. They looked strange and always made people think of some very strange things. The red pill was not small, but the smell of medicine had faded. It was impossible to tell what it was made of. Many years ago, Fei Jia had left it behind because he was worried about the tyrannical Jinqi in his body. Fan Xian thought for a moment, then hid the large longan-like pill in his belt. Looking at the remaining pills, Fan Xian laughed bitterly. He overturned his original idea and put them all away. He might run into that great grandmaster, so it was better to have more life-saving items. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.